Mic check 1, mic check 2, mic check 3.
I feel nauseous, believe me. Never had a lot of shit.
As soon as you give politicians power, any kind of power that didn't exist previously, if they can figure out a way to force you into carrying something that lets you enter businesses or lets you do this or lets businesses open, historically, they are not going to give that power up. They find new reasons to use it.
I'll be back.
We have to protect those freedoms at all costs, whether you agree with people's choices or not, because it is the foundation that this country was founded on. Freedom. This idea of freedom, there's so many people that think it's frivolous, it's not important, it's not the main thing that we should be focused on, but it is the literal structure that allows this country to be so fucking amazing. Every single country that's ever existed other than the United States, up until 1776, every fucking country that has ever existed was run by dictators. All of them. This is the first experiment in self-government that actually worked, and it created the greatest superpower the world's ever known. It created the greatest cultural machine, the greatest machine of art and creativity and innovation right fucking here. And how did it do that? It did it through freedom. And as soon as you see something, anything that comes along and inhibits your freedom, you should be very cautious of that thing. You should be very suspicious. Because anything that comes along that can inhibit your freedom is, by definition, anti-American.
Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you.
All right. Welcome back, Wolf Pack. This is Fox Reviews here for my weekly news recap from Behind Enemy Lines, where on YouTube, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized. Be sure to follow me on Getter at Fox Reviews. You can also follow at Direwolf, and I also have at Foxes, which is I'm not been as active on that account as I should be, but I should get back to posting gorgeous foxes because they are perfect. As always, I have a great show for you tonight, but first, I have to thank our sponsors. This show is only possible because of viewers like you. I would especially like to thank those of you that donate to us financially, including Kaylette, Ori Main, Nathan, Cameron, Tetris Freak, Slowpoke, Garcia, Thunder Erican, The White Lion, and The Timber Wolf. Money is not the only way that you can give, though. We also appreciate you liking and subscribing to us on DLive, Twitch, and YouTube. And we especially like when you share links to our channel on any social media you happen to find yourselves on. So, hope you guys enjoyed that little intro video from Joe Rogan. That was quite the that was quite the video that they got put together there. Somebody pulled that from the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, where Joe did that was his monologue, just kind of off the cuff, and it's amazing how somebody could have sat down and tried to write that out. You could have spent a week, a month trying to craft out the perfect way to say something the way that Joe said it, and he just so natural how he said it, and it was so concise, to the point, true. It was very true, hard hitting, and that video, adding all the the stock footage and the music and all that stuff, adding it all really added to the emotional hit of that monologue that he had. But all that it's just so true. And a lot of people were warning about this early on, that if you give 15 days to slow the spread, well, now we're at, I think it's at day like 570. We're coming up on 600 days here. We got these passports, these vaccine passports, and first it was get the shot. And then it was, well, now you got to get the 2 shots. And then now you got to get the 2 shots and at least 1 booster. And now they're talking about doing a second booster, even though, that's a political decision, and the FDA is not really recommending a second shot. They've not authorized they've not authorized a booster shot, much less a third booster shot or a second booster shot, for anybody outside of very at-risk groups. Yet Fauci's on TV talking about, well, maybe at least 1 booster shot to be considered fully vaccinated. It's like, well, what do you mean at least 1? They haven't even authorized the first one. How many am I supposed to get of this unauthorized vaccine? And the Democrats are, trust the science. Like, okay, well, we have an agency that's supposed to be doing the science, and they said no. And then you've got this TV doctor and Fauci saying yes. Take the unapproved medicine. Take the unapproved medicine, sheep. Take it twice. And that's perfectly fine and acceptable. And then someone like Joe Rogan says, a medical doctor, a high dollar medical doctor prescribed me this drug, and I took it and it made me better. And all of a sudden he's like, Hitler trying to gas the Jews or something. It's a little rich, and that, we know why, because none of it's not honest. It's not being honest. It's not actually the science. It's just purely about political control. And what Joe Rogan, I believe, was trying to get at there is that they will use any excuse. This time it's science. Any excuse to try to create a structure of control that inhibits your liberties. And once they have it, you really can't do a whole lot to get rid of it, even if the reasoning for it starts dissolving. That's what we're seeing with COVID right now. The justification for all of this top-down control, this rigid control structure they're trying to implement, that they've implemented quite successfully in the blue states and the blue cities. The reasoning for it is dissolving as we speak, yet they are still keeping those structures in place, and they're trying to figure out ways of making them more permanent. In response to Joe Rogan generally, a lot of people had a lot of takes about Joe Rogan the last few weeks. We had some on this show. But I think one of my favorites is Cenk Yogurt of the Young Turks, notably the Young Turks who genocided the Armenians, which Cenk denied for a very long time. Cenk responded to, so it's just funny. You got Cenk, who named his podcast after a group of genocidal Islamists, and he's upset that Joe Rogan likes liberty. That's a little on the nose there, Cenk. So Cenk's had this response to Joe Rogan. To all the loser at Joe Rogan fans crying over my attack on his freedom, hypocrisy, and stupidity, are you guys part of the crew, or do you kiss his ass for fun? I thought he was a big boy who could handle himself. If he doesn't like free speech, he can grow a pair and defend himself. Now, there was another tweet, which apparently I did not find. Apparently I grabbed the wrong one, where Cenk has offered to fight Joe Rogan. He thinks that he could beat Joe Rogan in a fight. And I don't think I need to go through a whole breakdown on Joe Rogan's fighting expertise. I'm sure most of you are aware of that. If not, look it up. But the idea that Shank could beat up Joe Rogan is quite funny, though. Somebody bet him $1,000. That's what it was. Somebody bet him $1,000 he wouldn't get in the ring with Joe Rogan, and Shank said that'd be the easiest $1,000 he ever made. So that's I think we'd all like to see that. I would donate money to see that Joe Rogan versus Cenk Uygur Octagon. Definitely let's do that. We had lots of other YouTube celebrity Octagon battles. I think Cenk and Joe Rogan that's the Octagon battle that we deserve. Let's see here. So another kind of opening funny bit we've got for the start of the show here is this. Now, I heavily researched this, but I really thought that this was a parody ad. I thought, the Babylon Bee, maybe they're making funny videos now that are kind of like a ironic leftist take or something like that. It's just a parody on the left. It turns out that actually this is a fully sincere, honest, quote unquote hit piece against Ron DeSantis, put out by a
Nazi fags.
Oh. How dare you?
Jews you need.
Why would you do that?
Adder Lupus donated $5. Thank you very much. He says, fat leftist killed by right-wing black belt MMA fighter. Yep, that would be the name of the fight. I would definitely pay a lot more than $5 to see that for sure. Let's see here. So, again, this the video we're about to watch is a fully sincere attack ad on Ron DeSantis, and it's pretty funny. It's not parody though; it's fully serious. Let's watch it.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of your cabin crew, we'd like to inform you that we have officially entered Florida airspace. Now that we're making our final descent, please watch this short message from Governor Ron DeSantis on COVID-19. Thereafter, everyone on board will be required to comply with the state's Forever Purge.
We are not doing any vaccine passports in the state of Florida. We trust people to make their own decisions in this state. We are not going to be bludgeoning people with restrictions and mandates and lockdowns or any of that stuff.
As Governor DeSantis stated, while you're within state lines, you do not have to wear a mask. You do not have to get a vaccine. It is against the law for private businesses or schools to mandate masks or vaccines. And you have the absolute right to infect whoever you want, whenever, and wherever with COVID-19. Thank you for traveling with us, and please, enjoy your Forever Purge.
COVID-19 is surging again.
This is the time to double down.
The governor is doubling down. He says students shouldn't be forced to wear masks.
If you are trying to lock people down, I'm going to stand in your way.
Florida just requested 300 new ventilators.
Hospitals are filling up here.
There is evidence that children are making up much higher cases that are emerging.
The numbers continue to rise across Florida.
This fall, don't breathe in.
This is insane.
The Forever Purge. Coming to a theater and live streaming networks near you.
So, Benjamin Franklin once said, and I know that there's some debate about this, that maybe he didn't say it, but it's commonly accepted that Benjamin Franklin said this. Benjamin Franklin once said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." It's funny because a lot of times it's kind of, shortened to, sacrificing your liberty for some safety, right? And this isn't what the left is, what this video was. Again, this is totally unironic, totally serious, meant to be a serious attack against Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis saying, we're not going to bludgeon you with lockdowns and restrictions and forcing mask mandates and forcing injections into your arm. We're not going to do any of that. And we're for freedom. If you're going to try to harass Florida citizens, Ron DeSantis is going to stand in your way. And the left looks at this, and it's not just that they want to, we've got all this freedom saved up or all this liberty saved up, and I want to like very frugally spend just a little bit of my liberty to purchase a little bit of safety. No. The left doesn't see liberty as anything of value. They don't have any issue with sacrificing it. Sacrificing implies that you actually you want to keep it. It's just you're bargaining and you're using it as a currency to purchase something else. And the reason why Benjamin Franklin said that the way that he did is because it's kind of a fraudulent purchase, right? If you're using your liberty to purchase freedom, if you're using your liberty to purchase safety, it might sound like a good deal, but it's really not a good deal. It's really a fraudulent purchase because you can't actually get safety that way. You can only get tyranny that way. But the left, they don't see liberty as something precious to be, frugally spent. They see it as something abhorrent, something awful and disgusting and terrible to get rid of as quickly as possible, something to be purged from existence. They have literally put a purge style, and again, not even a parody, I don't even know what to call it, but purge style music and cinematic around the idea of the government not harassing you, around the idea of the government not telling you what to do, around the idea that the government isn't going to forcibly shut down your business or regulate you to death or hold you down and inject your arm with whatever they feel like it. And the left sees your freedom to not have any of those things brought down upon you as terrifying as the Purge, which was, I'm sure all of you guys know, but just for completeness, was a series of movies about a 12-hour period of time every year in which there were no laws and everybody could run around murdering each other, and it was scary, and it's called The Purge. And the left sees liberty, they see freedom as the Purge. They see it as terrifying as everyone running around murdering each other, which is funny because all of their cities are actually the Purge. But again, even Benjamin Franklin, I don't know that he conceived of. I think the founding fathers had maybe a blind spot in that they thought a lot of people would like liberty, right? Benjamin Franklin saying this, he wasn't conceiving of a group of people where they were desperate to be subjugated. They were, abhorred by they found the idea of freedom abhorrent. He in his language says, people who would give up essential liberty to purchase a temporary safety. Again, the idea of that liberty is some kind of currency, which is a false dichotomy, and that's what he meant by it. But even people who would choose to trade liberty for safety would still see the value in the liberty. They would still see that they had some value and that they would, frugally use it to purchase some safety. He never had the idea that people would just purge themselves of liberty on purpose. That there would be a group of people who found liberty to be terrifying and disgusting and something that needed to be gotten rid of and something that was terrifyingly scary. And I think where I'm going with this is I don't know how we live with these people. It's concerning. What do you do with a group of people who are terrified of liberty, who think that it's the Purge, it's equivalent to the Purge? How are you supposed to live with them? And I don't know. I don't know what the solution to that is. But it's a growing problem, and it's become more and more clear it's a growing problem because as somebody who's liberty minded myself, I would like to be left alone. I would like to leave other people alone, right? And so you've got one side that wants to be left alone, that wants to, be secure in their family, choose what job they go to, have their, own some property, maybe make some stuff with their hands, or do or create and interact with people by choice, and don't want to control other people. They want to just be secure in their person and do what they want to do. And you got this other group of people that wants to control every aspect of the life of the first guy. That's not compatible world. Like, there's no way to find middle ground on that. What's the middle ground on that? It's like, well, why don't we just control half of the guy's life? No, what right do you have to control any of his life? And so that's the problem. And it's funny because it's always brought up as like, oh, it's polarization. We got extreme polarization right now between people who want to be left alone and people that want to bother them. I don't really see that as polarization. Again, what's the compromise there? Is the people that want to bother the people that want to be left alone? It's like, okay, well, we'll just compromise and they'll only bother you a little bit. That's not a good compromise. So it's concerning seeing something like this. Also, it was really amazing that this is you can see at the bottom here, it says this is a paid political advertisement paid for by Remove Ron. So this is an official political action committee advertisement, and kind of outside the philosophical aspects of it, just kind of on a technical level, I do want to go back to look at some of these quotes here. So this is an official political advertisement, and I don't know what the law is on like just wholesale making up things in a political advertisement, but I'm guessing that there's at least a little bit of restriction on that. So you'll see they've got a quote here, terrifyingly evil, from the Miami End-Times Tribune. There is no newspaper called the Miami End-Times Tribune. Then you've got your worst fears coming true, the Tampa Bay Terror Times. There is no newspaper there's no media outlet called the Tampa Bay Terror Times. Let's see here. A dark dystopian story, the Orlando Disaster Weekly. There is no newspaper called the Orlando Disaster Weekly. I think there's a couple more of these here. I think you guys get it though. Heart-stopping, the Pensacola Pandemic Press. There is there's no news show called the Pensacola Pandemic Press. And killer ending, Fort Lauderdale Virus Voice. There is no periodical called the Fort Lauderdale Virus Voice. So you've got the left here where they've gone so off the rails here, which I think this one, let's see here, this particular quote that they completely made up. Where was it? A dark dystopian story. You've got Ron DeSantis saying we're not going to. I'm just gonna replay that part here. So keep this wording here that they made up this quote from a non-existent newspaper. A dark dystopian story. What's a dark dystopian story? Let's watch what Ron DeSantis said that's got them so terrified. Let's see here.
We are not doing any vaccine passports in the state of Florida.
No vaccine passports. Dark and dystopian.
We trust people to make their own decisions.
We trust people to make their own decisions. Dark dystopia.
In this state, we are not going to be bludgeoning people.
We are not going to be bludgeoning people. It's funny that they just cut it off there. We're not going to be bludgeoning people. The government refuses to bludgeon people. That's so dystopic, guys. It's terrible.
With restrictions and mandates and lockdowns or any of that stuff.
So the government failing to bludgeon people with lockdowns and restrictions and mandates. The failure of the government to seize ultimate control over your life is a dark dystopia. Okay, that's the left. It's becoming, and one of the things that I was looking at trying to add into today, but I think we're gonna hold it off till maybe next week or the week after, is a recent set of polls that came out that kind of just reiterate that more and more a growing section of America is considering that a peaceful divorce, some kind of civil dispute to split up the country into various zones, give the left their half of the country, give the right their half of the country. More and more growing sect of Americans are interested in some kind of solution like that. And why? Why would you think that? Well, because again, you have this group of people who their ultimate goal is to control every aspect of the lives of the people that don't want to be bothered and don't want to bother other people. There's, again, what is the compromise there? Oh, well, we'll just let the left bother the right a little bit. We'll just take away half your liberties. That's not a good compromise. There's really no reason to compromise with that, because one side is inherently aggressive and the other side is inherently benign. The right isn't, everything the right wants to do is, hey, don't do this to other people. That's mostly what the right wants to do. The left is we want you to do this thing specifically. We want you to take this vaccine. We want you to not go to work. We want to shut down this sector of the economy. The right is, especially the libertarian right, is, just leave me alone. What if we didn't restrict it? What if we, again, like DeSantis said, we trust people in this state? Imagine if you had a DeSantis president right now. We trust people in this country. I would hope that we would someday have a president that thinks that, but we currently do not. So, again, why do an increasing section of America want a divorce of some kind with the leftist states? Well, it's because of stuff like this, because the left is terrified of liberty. They're terrified of the idea that the state would not bludgeon someone over the head with restrictions, lockdowns, and mandates. And there just is not a, again, what's the compromise there? Is the compromise that, well, we'll just let the leftist state bludgeon you over the head a little bit? They'll bludgeon you at half strength with mandates and lockdowns. You can go to work for half the week. You can keep half your money. You can, you can manage half your family's day. The other half belongs to the state. What is the compromise there? And there just isn't one. And so people have decided that they're tired of it. And like I said, well, maybe I'll do a longer episode another time about this, a revisit on the idea of some kind of peaceful divorce or unpeaceful divorce of the country. I'm not necessarily endorsing it one way or the other. It's just something I thought was, this sort of video explains why a growing section of America is just seeing that there is no ability to compromise with this. Alrighty. Our first story for tonight is, those are all kind of warm-up segments here. Our first main story today is the release of John Hinckley Jr., which might be a name that's familiar to some of the people more my age in the audience. If you're a little bit older, you certainly know this name for sure. Even if you don't, it probably sounds familiar. So John Hinckley Jr., this is from the New York Post here. He is to be unconditionally released 40 years after the Reagan assassination attempt. That's right. John Hinckley Jr., if you know that name, it's because he tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan while he was president. Pretty bad. And I just noticed this just now, but John Hinckley Jr. kind of looks like my neighbor. I'm going to have to do some more research on him. All right. So the New York Post details that, quote, John Hinckley Jr., the man who tried to assassinate President Ronald Reagan 40 years ago, is set to be unconditionally released after reaching an agreement with federal prosecutors. The agreement to lift Hinckley's current restrictions was reached during a federal court hearing in D.C. on Monday and will go into effect in June 2022, NBC reports. The judge agreed to lift all restrictions next year if Hinckley remains mentally stable. The 66-year-old is currently under court-imposed restrictions after moving from a Washington psychiatric hospital to his mother's home in Williamsburg, Virginia in 2016. Now, I didn't know this, that he had been released from the mental hospital in 2016 to go live with his mother. So, which they're going to go, yeah, actually, I'll just keep reading here. So, John Hinckley Jr., he spent 35 years in the psych hospital after being found not guilty by reason of insanity of trying to assassinate Ronald Reagan in 1981. Under the current court-imposed conditions, Hinckley has to have doctors and therapists oversee his psychiatric medication, and he is required to attend individual and group therapy sessions. What is there, like a group of people? Like, who do you go to group with after you've tried to assassinate the president? Do you get a chip or something? It was like, 40 years sober of trying to assassinate presidents. Let's see here. They continue. He is also unable to have possession of a gun and is banned from contacting Reagan's children or the actress Jodie Foster, whom he was obsessed with at the time of the shooting. Yes, I believe the story is that he tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan in a bid to impress Jodie Foster. She, from all reports, remains unimpressed. Hinckley's attorney last month asked for unconditional release, arguing that his client was no longer a threat. Well, it's not about him being a threat. It's about punishing. The left and a lot of people seem to forget that the prison system is it's penile, which means that it's punitive. We have a punitive justice system where it's not about containing dangerous individuals. It is about that too, but primarily it's about punishing people. It's about punishing people who broke the law. The prison sentence is the punishment. It's not about protecting society necessarily. It's about punishing. That's why you have all this like talk about like, oh, rehabilitation and all this stuff. It's like, okay, well, I mean, we can look into that, but primarily it's about punishment. It's not necessarily exclusively about removing them from society. It's about the punishment. Otherwise, you would have no white-collar criminals would ever go to prison, even though there's plenty that do. But if prison is merely about taking dangerous individuals out of the streets, out of society, then there's no reason to put white-collar criminals in jail. Yet we do that all the time because the justice system is about punishment. It's not about rehabilitation or, it's not exclusively about public safety. Let's see here. So, New York Post continues. Federal prosecutors had opposed ending the restrictions back in May and retained an expert to determine if Hinckley would pose a danger to himself or others if he were to be unconditionally released. A 2020 violence risk assessment carried out by Washington's Department of Behavioral Health found Hinckley would no longer pose a danger. Hinckley was 25 when he shot Reagan outside a Washington, D.C. hotel on March 30th, 1981. The president suffered a gunshot wound to his chest and was hospitalized for nearly 2 weeks. And then he bounced right back up and kept doing his Reagan stuff. 3 others were also wounded in the shooting. John Hinckley Jr. was found not guilty by reason of insanity of trying to assassinate the president and was committed to a psychiatric institute. Prior to the assassination attempt, Hinckley had also stalked Jodie Foster. Hinckley won a court battle last year that allowed him to publish his songs online and potentially make a living as a songwriter. Again, how is he making music? Oh, because he was living with his mom and had like a studio in her house instead of being in prison where he belonged. Let's see. There's just some images from just prior to the assassination. Well, this one's just prior, and this one's probably daring. So this is I bring this up because this was the Biden Department of Justice that has been pushing this through since day one of the Biden administration. Why were they pushing this through? It's because Ronald Reagan is a icon on the right, obviously. Now you might think in Fox, you're just being conspiratorial. No. The left has so thoroughly infiltrated all of the institutions. It doesn't have to be a top-down conspiracy. I don't think that Joe Biden is saying, hey, it's really going to piss off the right if we let go of the guy who tried to assassinate their icon, Ronald Reagan. I don't think anybody had to say that. They've just so thoroughly infiltrated all of the, regimes of power in the government that this sort of stuff just happens on its own. Somebody else at the Justice Department probably just thought, oh, you know what? I can do this. I can release the guy that tried to assassinate Reagan and it'll piss off the right. And they're right. It did. Now, this is ridiculous because the justification for the DOJ is that, well, he no longer poses a risk. As I said, it's not about whether he poses a risk or not. It's about whether or not he needs to be punished. And if you're trying to assassinate the president, you got to be punished. That's how that works. Which actually, I would be unsurprised if somebody doesn't do what happened to the guy that supposedly shot at JFK, that mobster that decided to take care of business on his own hands. I wouldn't be unsurprised if this guy has a little bit of a shorter lifespan now that he's not confined to his mother's house. But the other part of this too is he was 35 years. It's 35 years he was in a mental institute because he pled not guilty by reason of insanity. So there's some misconceptions about it, or at least there used to be. I think a lot of people kind of know now, but there's kind of this trope that there's a misconception about what not guilty by reason of insanity means. And it's not supposed to be a get out of jail free card. If you plead not guilty by reason of insanity, okay, you don't got to go to prison, but you do got to go to the mental hospital. You got to go there, and that's that. What should happen is that if eventually you get better, you regain your sanity, and you're now no longer insane and no longer need to be in the mental hospital, okay, but you got to go back to prison. It's not just you pretend to be crazy or you really are crazy, and then it's like, oh, I got better. Now I'm free to go, right? No. If you got better, well, now you go back into the system as if you were a sane person, and you still gotta be punished for those crimes. I don't know what the legal theory on it is. Maybe there's this kind of legal theory that your mind was like a different person at the time when you're insane. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but from a just what is right perspective, not necessarily what is the specific law, what is the specific legal philosophy under it, just from a what feels right about it. What feels right is that pleading not guilty by reason of insanity should not be a get out of jail free card, and then just all of a sudden when you regain your sanity, well, now you're free to go. No. When you regain your sanity, you need to go back to prison. He should have, when he was done with the mental institute, instead of going and getting to live with his mom, probably in her basement, they should have sent him back to prison. And this idea that, oh, well, he no longer poses a danger to society. Well, who cares? Who cares if he doesn't pose? If that's the if that's the legal theory that we're operating under, is like, well, if as long as somebody doesn't pose a risk to society, we just release them back into it. Again, no white collar crime. There's just no reason to have white collar crime. It doesn't really pose a risk it doesn't pose a danger to anybody. Maybe on like a financial level it poses a danger, but they're not violent. White collar criminals aren't violent. So this was clearly, in my opinion, and it seems pretty obvious that it was, this was just one of the many moves by the Biden administration and the leftists that have been installed in the government just to try to stick it to the right. Just to make sure that all of the criminals, anybody who attacked somebody on the right, that they are released and set free. You had something similar to this a couple of weeks ago when Andrew Cuomo resigned from the governor of New York. And his final act as governor before he resigned was to release from prison a terrorist that had been in prison for like 30, 40 years, who had helped with an assassination of 12 police officers as part of a Weather Underground plot, and had worked closely with Bill Ayers, who famously, Bill Ayers' living room is where Obama launched his Senate campaign. So you've got some other stuff where there was early in the Biden administration, there was a pardon for this other cop killer. You got a lot of this stuff going on where it is, and obviously just at the city and state level, you've got the city and state level prosecutors releasing as quickly as they possibly can any member of Antifa, especially if they were hurting conservatives or just doing anything that was for the leftist agenda. You've got this like ring of prosecutors making sure that they see no prison time and getting them cleared from the system as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, you have the same DOJ holding without charges anybody who happened to have shoes in the Capitol that day, whether they were being violent or not, holding them without charges for going on 8 months now. You've got the FBI fabricating terror plots as if they're right-wing extremists, fabricating right-wing extremist terror plots. Half a dozen at this point. And you've got all this effort by the administration and the law enforcement apparatus and these wings of the government at framing right-wingers. At the same time, anything a left-winger does, anything at all, it doesn't matter if it's trying to assassinate a conservative president, they are to be released, allowed back into society to continue wreaking havoc as much as possible. And obviously this guy, 66, he's probably... they're probably right that he's not actually a physical danger to anybody, but it doesn't matter. Again, it's a punishment thing. But it's demoralizing. It's meant to be demoralizing. Everything the left does with their power is meant to either demoralize you in spirit or endanger you in body. Everything that they do can be traced down to those two motivations. Sometimes they get really creative and are able to accomplish both motivations at the same time. All right, let's see here. So our next story here is about everybody's favorite general, General Milley. General Milley. All right. Well, Mr. 4-star General Milley here. He had a hell of a week. So did his lover, Lloyd Austin. Not that there's any problem with that. It's just, highlighting the incestuous nature of the government. Let me take a drink here. So there was a couple of hearings this week on the Afghanistan pullout that Milley and Lloyd Austin were invited to, and they were able to speak in front of Congress as to and answer some questions about why we left $100 billion of military equipment behind, why we left 4,000 Americans behind, and why we got a bunch of Marines and sailors and I think an Army guy killed. Why did all the stuff happen? Why did we kill 7 children and say that it was a ISIS-K member? So they had some fun this week, and they got to answer those questions in front of Congress. Here is and during that, Milley had a real heck of a time because he was under oath and had a hard time. He wasn't able to lie as easily because he was under oath. And because of that, Milley admitted to what I would consider to be treason multiple times. Yet he doesn't think that he did that. Let's watch. Oh, something just happened. There we go.
Told him that we are not going to attack them. And I told him that we are not going to attack. President Trump has no intent to attack. And I told him that repeatedly. And I told him if there was going to be an attack, there'll be plenty of communications going back and forth. Your intel system's going to pick it up. I said, I'll probably call you. Everybody will be calling you. We're not going to attack you. Just settle down. It's not going to happen.
Now, you write in your book, you report.
So there was Milley testifying to Congress about his phone call with the Chinese. As I had said a few weeks ago, it seemed pretty obvious from a lot of independent sources that phone call had indeed taken place. Milley confirmed that, yes, that phone call did take place at the congressional hearings under oath, and he did confirm the content of those phone calls with his Chinese quote-unquote counterpart, that he did make a commitment to his counterpart that his counterpart would be warned beforehand if Trump had decided to have some kind of first strike action against China, that Milley would preempt that first strike by warning the Chinese of the attack ahead of time, which, if you know anything about military strategy, or even if you don't, you can kind of guess that the enemy being warned about a surprise attack would, ruin the surprise. Which is also in military terminology known as treason. You're actually not authorized as a member of the military or anybody with classified clearance levels. You're actually not allowed to use your clearance levels to warn adversaries of pending surprise attacks. That's actually called treason. So there we have it. Milley admitted to treason, which I think that word's been overused. Possibly even I've overused it. It's also possible that just the Democrats commit literal treason so often that it just seems like it's overused. But that is, to try to feel in your heart the weight that the word treason should hold, even though maybe it's been overused the last few years. Milley admitted to committing treason. He admitted to making a promise to the enemy to warn them ahead of time of any surprise attack, thus breaking the surprise attack. He also admitted to subverting President Donald Trump's foreign policy, strategy. Milley said he told the Chinese general not to worry about it, that Trump wasn't really planning on attacking them. Well, Trump's foreign policy strategy was to be crazy like a fox and scare all of our adversaries into not having any idea what he was going to do at any given time. Now, a lot of people said that this is a chaotic foreign policy. Like, I mean, I don't know. We got Kim Jong-un to settle down. We got Iran to settle down. We got China was, again, I've brought this up several times the last couple of weeks and last year, is before COVID, Trump had ironed out a trade deal with China, which saw them purchasing so much of our domestically produced oil. China didn't know what to do with it. They were worried they were going to have to build new storage tanks because they didn't know what they were going to do with all the oil Trump was forcing them to purchase from us. China has 1.5 billion people in it. They're starving for energy at all times, and Trump he forced them to purchase so much energy from America, they didn't know what to do with it. And all of that they were leaving Hong Kong alone for the most part. They weren't doing naval operations off the coast of Taiwan or threatening Australian navigation or sea navigation. They weren't doing any of that stuff, and that's all because Trump was a mad lad about his foreign policy. Maybe if you take out one of our drones, Iran, maybe we're going to send a whole fleet of them to blow up your bases. And maybe we'll just, we'll turn them around at the last minute, but maybe we won't. And maybe one of your top generals will be getting into a cab one day and then just turn into a pile of pink mist because we drone striked him too. You never know what's going to happen. And that was the Trump policy. That was a Trump policy, and it kept our adversaries in line. And China was staying in line because they didn't know whether or not Trump was going to attack them, and that kept them cautious. Part of, the older, I'm awful at history, guys. I'm sure I'm going to hear about it in chat here. One of our former presidents said, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." I can't remember which one. Please let me know in chat. I'm sure I'm going to hear all about it. Speak softly and carry a big stick. And Trump was, the Trump doctrine was more speak bombastically and randomly and wave your stick around, but don't necessarily hit him with it. And what Milley did was tell them, hey, the stick's a lie. We're not actually going to hit you with the stick. It doesn't matter what Trump says. But now you've got China sitting there thinking, oh, well, okay. Well, now we can start acting with that new information. Before we weren't sure if China started ingressing into the ocean space too much, that okay, well maybe there's going to be some consequences for that. Maybe Trump actually will attack one of our ships if we keep doing flybys and buzzing each other's ships and starting to take over certain making these islands and stuff out in the middle of nowhere so we can claim that as our ocean territory. Maybe Trump's actually going to do something about that. And so they were cautious. They were slow. They were more deliberate. And then Milley goes and tells them, he gives away the game, gives away the bluff. Trump was bluffing. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But Milley goes and tells them that it was a bluff. And even if it's not a bluff, Milley's going to warn them about it before Trump lays down that royal flush. And so then what's China do? Well, what have we had China do the last couple of years? We had China, which I forgot to pull it up here. Let me see if I can find it here. But China has had some unprecedented aggression the last 8 months, certainly aggression at levels that we hadn't seen the 4 years of Trump. And it was because, well, they knew that it didn't matter how aggressive they were. Milley was going to give them a heads up. And we've got, their aggression with Hong Kong. They have been doing different Navy maneuvers and military exercises in parts of the ocean that they've never been in, right on the border of our territory, right around Taiwan. They've got a bunch of military exercises planned around the Taiwan region now. It's actually so bad, so concerning, that we recently had we just sealed a new treaty with our two allies, the UK and Australia, to give them American nuclear technology, because we are so concerned about, and it was specifically because of the Chinese threat, we're so concerned about what the Chinese are about to do that we're giving our nuclear technology to our allies to make sure that there's, even if we're knocked out of the game, they are still around to respond with it. That's a big step for America to be giving away nuclear technology like that. And why did we do it? Well, because of the Chinese threat. And that can all be relatively directly, especially in the last 8 months. Any move that China has made that you've heard about in the last 8 months is all directly attributable to Milley. The world is a more dangerous place because of Milley making that phone call. Because Milley gave away the game and told them, don't worry about it. We're not going to attack you until, and if we do, I'll call you ahead of time so that you're prepared about it. So that if we do attack, you can knock down all of our missiles. You can make sure that your people are out of the region. You can make sure that you move your boats, that you can prepare for any surprise attack by the Americans. You don't got to worry about it. And so China said, great, we don't got to worry about it. Now we're going to do whatever we want to do. Let's see here. Did somebody in the chat? It was Roosevelt. It was Teddy Roosevelt. Thank you, Great Apathy. Teddy Roosevelt said, speak softly and carry a big stick. And I'm sure you guys all, because I didn't know that, probably going to downvote the video and just leave and unsubscribe, and I wouldn't blame you. Milley made some other admissions during his I tried to calculate it out. It seemed like his I think between him and Lloyd, I think that they had 2, maybe 3 hearings. I think I might have missed one. And I think that they were on the Hill for like up to 10 hours over the course of last week, which is a lot of time. It's a lot of time to be on the Hill answering questions. And, it's not a lot of time to escape those questions either. And so Milley, while I wish that we could go through all 10 hours and go through pretty much every word Milley's saying as either being a lie, finger pointing, or admission of treason, we only have so much time for the show here. But I do encourage you guys to at least try and watch through some of the highlights from the hearings this past week, if not watching the whole thing. Let's see here. So, but yeah, 10 hours is a long time, and Milley is pretty backed into a corner there, and so he said all kinds of interesting things. This one was particularly interesting. Let's watch here.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. Let me recognize Senator Scott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Milley, why would you, as the sitting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, talk to a reporter that's writing a book about a prior administration? Why would that be part of your job description?
Well, as Senator Blackburn said earlier, I deal with the media routinely, 2, 3, 4 times a week. I'm talking to the media, and the media, whether it's books, TV news, reporters, we have a lot of media here. I think it's very, very important to make sure that senior officials talk to the media in all of its various forms in order to explain what we're doing.
That you're not.
There you go, Milley. Talking to the media is my job. That's pretty crazy, because I thought that the White House had a press secretary that talked to the media. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I thought that part of it was I thought there was an official speaker for the White House that was Jen Psaki. I did not realize that the military advisor to the president, was also supposed to be having book deals and media appearances on the side. That was news to a lot of people. I think it was news to Congress. It's interesting that Milley, you kind of see how Milley sees himself, because he's being honest there. I think Milley does believe that talking to the media is his job, but it's not. And I think maybe I'm going to go over this in a little bit here, but I think I'm going to try and recap it right now. To be clear on what Milley's job is, I encourage all you guys to go look this up, but there's a lot of confusion about what General Milley is. So General Milley, as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is a cabinet position. He is the advisor, the military advisor to the president. As I went over last week, General Milley, as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, is not in the chain of command. The military has two chains of command. There's the administrative chain of command, and there's the operational chain of command. Milley is not in either chain of command. There is no now. So there's a couple of reasons why people don't understand what Milley's position is. It's because he wears the uniform and people call him general, right? And his title is actually the top military officer in the government, which is also kind of not true. It is his title, but it's kind of a propagandistic term. It's like calling him like a minister of good things, or something like that you would hear out of like one of the dystopic novels where you had a name of something that was kind of the opposite or misleading as to what it actually did. And that's what Milley's titles really are in his current position, because a lot of people think Milley's in the military. Milley thinks he's in the military. Milley was in the military. Milley's not currently in the military. He is he was a general, but he's retired. He's not active military right now. He is retired. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the military advisor to the president, that position, by definition, is a retired veteran, which Milley is. Milley is retired. So two things to keep a note here, because people keep getting confused about this. I got confused about this. A lot of people don't know this, and the media is purposefully confusing this to make you think that Milley is he's a general, he's in the military, he's a general in the military, he's in part of the chain of command, all that stuff. It's purposefully confusing. Two things to keep a note here. Milley is not in either the administrative or the operations hierarchy of the military. There is no other person in the military. There is no person in the military. There's no person in the military who is not in either chain of command. Every single person in the military is in either the administrative chain of command or the operations chain of command. There is no just floating throughout the chain of command. Everybody's in one chain of command or the other. So for Milley to not be in either chain of command, to be specifically excluded from the chain of command, that's one strike against him that he's not in the military. The second strike against him that he's not in the military is that his position is, by definition, to have that position, you have to be retired, a retired veteran. So Milley seems to think that he's in the military still, and the media would like you to think that he's in the military still, because, and we're going to get into this, it makes a difference whether or not Milley is actively in the military or not. It makes a difference, and it's very perception difference too. But Milley would love for everybody to believe that he's in the military, he's currently active status, that he actually is part of the chain of command. Because a lot of the stuff that he did, that he admitted in the books that he did, was insert himself into chain of command operations, telling active duty officers to get his go-ahead before they issued some part of the nuclear strikes, or if they were doing certain exercises or anything like that, where he has no authority to ask them to do that, and they've got no obligation to do that for him because he's not in the military. Again, he was, but he's currently a retired veteran. There's lots of veterans all over the place. They don't just get to, and they still get to retain their rank as long as they were honorably discharged, and that's great. And they're a retired veteran at that rank. Great. But they're retired. They can't just pop back in and start giving orders, and Milley can't either. Let's see here. So back to Milley and his book deals here. So the big thing that happened last month or so was that this book came out that Milley was quoted in as saying, he had a couple conversations with the Chinese about, he would warn them of an attack ahead of time. And then he also admitted that he had tried to illegally, treasonously insert himself into the chain of command for the nuclear strikes. All of that extremely illegal. But it turns out that Milley actually has a couple of other books that he's quoted in recently too. It wasn't just one book. It wasn't just two. It wasn't just three. It's possibly four, maybe even five. And there's actually a funny bit during the hearings where there was some confusion as to whether or not Milley had appeared in 4 books or 5 books in the last 8 months, because Milley spends so much time speaking to authors about book deals that we don't know how many he's got. I mean, five books in a year. The year's not even over yet. Let's see here. Let's watch Milley try to weasel his way out of some of these questions.
Please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Milley, I've just got one more question for you about these many book interviews that you did. I Alone Can Fix It's one book, Perils, another book. Frankly, we did win this election. The inside story of how Trump lost is the third book. Seems like that's a significant outlay of time.
I don't think so. I think that
they were short interviews.
Relatively short. I don't think it took an excessive amount of time.
What was the time frame on these interviews for these 3 different books? These are, by the way, these are for folks who don't know at home. You said you didn't read the books. I don't think most people probably do. These are DC Insider tell-all type books. But what was the time frame, did you say, that you were doing these interviews?
I would say it took a couple of hours, maybe.
But when? What's the time frame? When were you sitting for them? Dates?
I can get you the dates. I don't know.
This
I don't
year?
know off the top of my head, but I'll get you the dates.
2021?
Oh, yeah.
So it was this calendar year?
I think so, yeah, sure.
Well, I just am wondering, is clearly this was a priority for you. You did these on the record, by the way? All these interviews are on the record with these reporters? They quote you?
I do interviews on the record, off the record, and I do background interviews. And I do all of that with print media, television media, books, documentaries, all kinds of things.
Why would you do background and off the record interviews? Background means you can't quote you. Background and off the record interviews if the goal is transparency.
The transparency goes to the fact to make sure that we are explaining ourselves and make sure that these authors have correct information.
Not attributable
let's take
to you.
Woodward, for example. Probably 200 people interviewed, and they approach my guys to say, are these facts true? This is what we heard. So we clarify and mitigate any incorrect information.
Interesting. Well, it's interesting. I mean, you're doing these interviews, you're doing them in 2021. It just makes me wonder, all of these different books, were you maybe a little distracted? Maybe a little distracted about what was going on in Afghanistan? Here's why I'm asking. General Miller testified to this committee that he warned about the rapid erosion of the military situation in Afghanistan as early as March of 2021. He further testified that he informed you about his view on this. He also testified that he said that the collapse of the Afghan security forces and the Afghan government could come very fast in 2021.
Hard and fast.
And he said that he informed you this. He also said that he informed Secretary Austin of this.
He did.
Now, at the same time, however, in June, you were saying, and I quote you now, an outright takeover by the Taliban is unlikely. That's at an Armed Services Committee meeting in the House, June 23rd. In July, you said the Afghan security forces have the capacity to sufficiently fight and defend their country. You also said that they were well equipped. On June 17th, you told the Senate Appropriations Committee the Afghan government had a 325 to 350,000 person security force, which we now know is a drastic overestimate. A few days later, you lowered that to 300,000. Which we still know is a drastic overestimate. Your generals on the ground, your commander on the ground is saying one thing. The Taliban has a massive offensive underway from May 1st on, but yet you told us very different things in public. How do you reconcile those things? What am I missing?
Well, first of all, Scott Miller did say hard and fast, and he also meant that, at least to me and to others, that he meant that to be in the fall, October, November, maybe even December timeframe.
I heard you say that earlier.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that. I have to tell you, that wasn't his testimony to this committee.
Well, what he said in the committee was hard and fast. He didn't put a date on it. Is the readouts to me? I don't know. Did he put a date on it?
No, he didn't put a date on
But he
it.
did
You
put
put
a
a date on it. That's what intrigues me.
But he did put a date on it with me. and to us. And when pressed, it was after we leave, that was point one, which was 31 August, and probably into the October timeframe, maybe Thanksgiving, and that is about more or less where many of the intel assessments were.
He said he was a dissenter on the intel
he did.
assessment.
That's right.
And he didn't put any of those qualifiers on his testimony to us. So are you saying he shifted his testimony, General Miller, that he wasn't?
No, I'm saying what he told me was it was likely to be in the October timeframe. The intel assessments are centering around November, Thanksgiving at the latest, Christmas. Some intel assessments went into the next year. Here's my point, Senator, is the intel assessments had two basic things, in my view, was the scale and scope plus the speed. All the intel assessments, all of us, got that wrong. There's no question about it. That was a swing and a miss on the intel assessment of 11 days in August. There's nobody that called that.
Well, can I just, General, my time is about, I appreciate that you've made these points. I don't mean to cut you off. It's just that my time is about to expire. I just want to say this. It seems to me that you put a high priority on making sure that you were favorably portrayed by the D.C. press corps. You spent a lot of time doing that. Fair enough if that's your priority, but at the same time, we had a rapidly deteriorating, frankly, disastrous situation in Afghanistan, which resulted in the death of 13 soldiers, including one from my home state, hundreds of civilians, and hundreds of Americans left behind. And in my view, that mission can't be called a success in any way, shape, or form, logistical or otherwise. General, I think you should resign. Secretary Austin, I think you should resign. I think this mission was a catastrophe. I think there's no other way to say it, and there has to be accountability. I respectfully submit it should begin with you.
Senator,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So we have some interesting back and forth there, and I think it's highly relevant that the option before Milley is he can either admit that he was so focused on talking to authors that were looking at making hit pieces about Trump that he was distracted, and that led to a degradation in the withdrawal quality in Afghanistan. That led to a disaster. Or because the thing about that's fixed, right, is the Afghan withdrawal was objectively a disaster. The cause of it is either Milley was distracted because of all these book deals and book interviews to try and make Trump look bad, or because Milley's just absolutely unreconcilably incompetent. He can either have been distracted or he can be incompetent, but it's got to be one or the other. It's funny that Milley decided to go with the incompetence route because, nobody could have possibly predicted this. Yeah, they did actually predict that it was going to go hard and fast, as you just testified. They just maybe got the date wrong. But the idea that it was unpredictable is it's completely false. I think a lot of the guys on the ground, we've seen a lot of documentaries and reports over the last 10 years about just the absolute rock bottom quality of the Afghan security forces and just how awful at their jobs they were. I don't think we need to go back over that again. That information's certainly been out there for a while, but I'm sure if you asked and surveyed some of the guys on the ground from our military, they'd say, "Oh yeah, the security force thing, it's a joke. It's going to fold in a day." And I don't think it would have been a surprise to them. In fact, it wasn't a surprise to many of those guys when this happened last month. It was a surprise to guys like Milley, who, earlier in the year was sending out recommendations to the troops that they should read about why white people are inferior and why race mixing is bad and why black people are unable to keep a schedule. A book by Ibram X. Kendi. He was doing that, and then he was speaking with a bunch of authors that were trying to write books that would be hit pieces on the Trump administration. And, it's, is it because he was incompetent? Is it because he was distracted? I would submit that it's because he's incompetent. It's interesting, too, when Milley's pressed on, were these interviews on the record or off the record? And he says, well, some of it was off the record, and he's asked again by Senator Hawley, if the point of this was transparency, like why was it off the record? And I guess transparency is anonymous sources now. According to the military code of justice, and federal law. It is unlawful to use government equipment and or facilities such as computers, phones, and offices for personal gain or partisan political purposes. It is unlawful to use government time when you're on duty to further your position or title for gain. And it's interesting because, as I said, Milley's not in the military. He's retired. He's a veteran. I don't think I go so far as to call him a civilian, but he's a retired veteran who is in the cabinet of the president. He's a member of the cabinet for the president. So what's interesting is that maybe some of the military codes don't actually apply to him, though I believe that some of those codes still apply to government officials. There's still, ethics violations and things too. I guess, as I said, federal law also covers that. So yes, he still is running afoul of using government resources to further himself, either politically or financially. Let's see here. So as we saw, the end of that there was Howley said that he thinks that Milley should resign. I think Milley should resign, and a lot of other people have been saying that Milley needs to resign as well as part of a take accountability measure. Tom Cotton from Arkansas got one of the best answers from Milley here, and a lot of people were like, very impressed with this answer here. So we're going to watch through this back and forth with Tom Cotton and Milley about why Milley thinks he shouldn't have to resign, and then we'll talk about why Milley's wrong.
I can only conclude, General Milley, I can only conclude that your advice about staying in Afghanistan was rejected. I'm shocked to learn that your advice wasn't sought until August 25th on staying past the August 31 deadline. I understand that you're the principal military advisor, that you advise, you don't decide, the president decides. But if all this is true, General Milley, why haven't you resigned?
Senator, as a senior military officer, resigning is a really serious thing, and it's a political act if I'm resigning in protest. My job is to provide advice. My statutory responsibility is to provide legal advice or best military advice to the president, and that's my legal requirement. That's what the law is. The president doesn't have to agree with that advice. He doesn't have to make those decisions just because we're generals. And it would be an incredible act of political defiance for a commissioned officer to just resign because my advice is not taken. This country doesn't want generals figuring out.
He's a retired commissioned officer.
What orders we are going to accept and do or not. That's not our job. The principle of civilian control of the military is absolute. It's critical to this republic. In addition to that, just from a personal standpoint, my dad didn't get a choice to resign at Iwo Jima. And those kids that are at Abbey Gate, they don't get a choice to resign. And I'm not going to turn my back on them. I'm not going to resign. They can't resign, so I'm not going to resign. There's no way. If the orders are illegal, we're in a different place. But if the orders are legal from civilian authority, I intend to carry them out.
Thank you, Senator Cotton.
Oh, wow. That was, the boys at Abbey Gate, they couldn't resign. And, Iwo Jima, they couldn't resign. And the guys kicking down Nazi doors in World War II, they couldn't resign. Get mustard gas and all that stuff. They couldn't resign, so I can't resign either. No, Milley, you're being asked to resign because you broke the law. Milley's pretending that they want him to resign because, only because of a series of bad decisions that led to the debacle in Afghanistan and also led to 13 servicemen unnecessarily losing their lives. And in retaliation, we killed 7 children. Great. No, Milley is being asked to resign partially because of that. But the other part is because he subverted the chain of command of the military. He acted in opposition to President Trump at the end of the administration. He had attempted to illegally insert himself into the nuclear chain of command. And he had committed treason by promising to leak classified intelligence about possible troop movements to our adversaries. He is being asked to resign because that is the best possible thing, the best possible consequence Milley should hope for based off all of the things that he's done. And Milley is right though about one thing during his little monologue. There was it would have been an act of political defiance if he had resigned. And he's also right that the kids the servicemen at Abbey Gate were unable to resign, and his dad at Iwo Jima and all those places. The reason why they're unable to resign is because they're in the thick of it. Somebody who can resign is Milley. And somebody like Milley or one of the other commanders like Lloyd Austin or was it Milley? No, it's not Mark Marley. I can't remember. The other guy that's actually in the chain of command, the other general. They are the ones that are supposed to resign because they're right. The boots on the ground can't resign. So to protect the boots on the ground from a bad decision, that's where the generals are supposed to be resigning at. Yeah, it's an act of political defiance, but it's the thing that they can do. The servicemen on the ground, they were willing to give their lives to defend each other. Milley wasn't even willing to give up his position to defend them. The troops on the ground are willing to give their lives to protect each other. The officers back at the Pentagon and DC need to be at least willing to give up their position and resign in order to protect them. And they're not even willing to do that. And Milley pretending that, if I just, rally around the flag and, support our troops and, our troops are heroes and all that stuff, that people will forget about what Milley's done. And it's just, I don't know, maybe it works on some people. I'm starting to see through it, and more people need to. Milley, it's also important to remember, as I said earlier, I kind of set this up a little bit ahead of time, and now we're getting back to the payoff here. Milley is retired. He is a retired veteran. He had achieved the rank of general. He was commissioned, and he wasn't dishonorably discharged, so he gets to maintain that rank, but he is retired. He's not in the military anymore. He's retired from the military, which means that he's not in the military. I know I keep repeating myself over and over and over again, but I have to combat the media narrative and his narrative too, and I think confusion from a lot of Congress that Milley is still in the military. He's not. He's not in the military. He's a veteran. He's retired from the military. And we know that he's retired from the military because the position that he holds is, by definition, the definition of the position is a retired veteran. And Milley is specifically not in either the administrative or the operations chain of command of the military. So and there is no other person in the military who doesn't exist in either chain of command. So if Milley was in the military, he'd be the only person in the entire U.S. military in history that was in the military but didn't belong to one or the other chain of commands. So we've got two reasons why Milley is not in the military. So when he's being asked to resign, a lot of people are saying, "Oh wow, that's a big thing to ask a military general to resign his post and to leave the military." No. Nobody's asking him to resign from the military because Milley is not in the military. Milley can't resign from the military. He's not in the military. He's already retired. They're asking him to resign from his cabinet position. Now, if that was to be phrased like that, the way I just did, that we're not asking him to resign from the military because he's not in the military, we're asking him to resign from his cabinet position, that changes the conversation a lot. And there's been intentional confusion created by Milley, assisted with the media.
Fags. How dare you?
Why would you do that?
You committed treason, you usurped military chain of command authority, and you committed a coup against the U.S. president. So why haven't you resigned? Well, people who didn't commit treason couldn't resign. So yeah, General Mills, paraphrased.
Thank you, Triumvirate, for that $10, and that was a great way to put it. That yes, I committed treason, and people who didn't commit treason, they couldn't resign, so I'm not going to resign either. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So again, if the conversation is phrased this way and it's explained that Milley's not being asked to resign from the military, he's being asked to resign from his cabinet position, it really changes the context of the conversation, because I don't think it's a big deal to resign from a cabinet position. there's lots of, we had under Trump, we had, half of his cabinet resigned at one point. There's been resignations of cabinet members all the time. It's cabinet members get removed and renominated. It's not as big of a deal for somebody to resign from the cabinet. Now it is a little bit of a political scandal because it doesn't look great for the president that is, his chosen advisors, have no confidence in him and that they've resigned. But it's different to resign. I think it's fundamentally a different thing to say, oh, Milley is going to be asked to resign from his cabinet position than to say Milley is being asked to resign from the military. And the big difference being is that one's the truth, the other one's a lie. But Milley and the media and the Democrats are doing their best to pretend to create this kind of aura of confusion that Milley is actually in the military. And when you're attacking Milley, you're attacking an active duty 4-star general. No, you're not. You're attacking a member of Joe Biden's cabinet. And I think a lot of the senators and congressmen are confused about that too, because I think that I think a lot of people it's never been tested. It's never really mattered. I just think a lot of people don't realize, and that's why I can't say it enough, the Joint Chiefs of Staff chair is a retired veteran. They're part of the cabinet and they're retired. They're not a active duty military. Milley can't resign from the military. So because he's not in the military right now. So you look at his little, monologue there where he's like, oh, well, I can't resign from the military because, these boys at Abbey Gate, they couldn't resign. They're dead now. But if he were to change that, if he were to say it truthfully, like, well, the servicemen at Abbey Gate, they couldn't resign from the military, and I'm not in the military, I'm in the cabinet, and so I'm not going to resign from the cabinet either. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. There's no linkage there. It's not the same thing. It's a completely different context. And so I guess to anybody that will listen, because it seems to me everybody is missing this point, or they're unable to make the distinction, or they're not confident about having done the research on it the way that I did. For the last time here, General Milley cannot resign from the military because he's not in the military. So everybody asking him to resign, it looks like it's this like big grand thing, like, oh my gosh, like asking a active duty military person to resign. Like, wow, that's big. They resign their commission and they lose their pension and all this stuff. It's like, no. He would just be resigning from the cabinet. All right. Let's see here. Moving on. We also had a few other things confirmed during these hearings. I'm just kind of running down the list here. So Milley and many of his senior advisors told Biden that the Afghan military would collapse immediately. They were pressed on that because Biden famously said that, well, none of my military advisors said that it was going to collapse this quickly. And then under oath, his military advisors said, yeah, we did tell him that. Biden was the one who made the call to leave. He did this in opposition to the recommendation of his military advisors. More importantly, it was Biden that pushed the lie that the Afghan army was strong and capable. The choice to leave was not the problem. It was the lie that we would be pulling out from a stable and safe area that led to nearly all the bad choices made during the planning of the withdrawal. So, kind of to restate that, a lot of the decisions made during the withdrawal, like let's abandon Bagram, let's pull out the military before we pull out civilians. Let's not advise green card holders and Afghan allies that the country is going to dissolve imminently and that you need to get out of the country. All of those decisions, the decision to not deploy more troops there, to not secure the airspace, to not secure Kabul as a city, all of those decisions they don't make any sense now. But if you look at the situation and think, oh well, let's assume that Afghan's stable and not collapsing. Let's assume that the Afghan security forces have some level of competency and aren't going to dissolve immediately. Let's assume that the Taliban hasn't taken over 60 to 70% of the provinces already. if you would make those assumptions, all the decisions made during the withdrawal suddenly make sense. And so this was the problem. And this was the problem, is that the assumptions of the current conditions on the ground just did not come even close to matching reality. And because of that, the real world decisions made on those fictitious assumptions failed. It's as simple as that. Let's see here. So it was the State Department. We also learned during these hearings at the State Department that they're one of the reasons why there was a delay in pulling out civilians, because they couldn't make a decision one way or the other if they wanted to create a PR disaster before the withdrawal or after the withdrawal. They chose basically both. Let's see here. Milley eventually admitted to everything that he was accused of in the book Peril, which again covered on the show a few weeks ago, that there were some accusations made in the book Peril that again Milley had 2 phone calls with China and made a commitment to warn them of any surprise attacks by the U.S. He had attempted to insert himself into the chain of command for the nuclear launch. He had requested that enlisted commissioned officers give him a oath of loyalty, and that he had been discussing with the executive branch, or with the legislative branch, with Nancy Pelosi, about ways in which they could subvert Trump's ability to launch a nuclear strike. In the book, he's quoted as having described going through the process of making sure that if Trump wanted a nuclear strike, it would move as slowly and inefficiently as possible. And so at the time when we first went through this a few weeks ago, we didn't know how much of that was true. Some of it seemed true. Some of it seemed like it needed confirmation. Well, we found out during these hearings, and Milley under oath basically admitted to all of that. So all of that was true, which means that, those were the things that Milley did that he was proud to talk about. Imagine the things that he knows. Oops, that was probably a little too far. Imagine how much of that stuff is still yet to be revealed. Milley also contradicted himself many times, so many it really can't be counted, and it's kind of difficult to go through because they all take place over the course of the 8 hours, 2 days worth of testimony. Let's see here. So one particular example, which was interesting to highlight, was that he had seemed to be overly willing and zealous to share private conversations that he had with Trump, to Congress and to the authors of these books that he was working on. Yet he did not have that same kind of candor, that same liberal candor when it came to conversations that he had with Joe Biden. It was also interesting that he was asked certain questions that were in the book, that he had seemed to have given up information during these interviews with the book, and information could be found in the book. Yet when Congress asked him similar questions, he said that he was unable to answer those questions. And so it was interesting that when a liberal hit piece about Trump comes out, he's willing to tell all. And when Congress asks him the same questions, stuff's classified. I can't really talk about it. Let's see here. While Milley and Austin have committed treason and remain free, men like Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller, whose only crime was to call for accountability of his leaders, was officially removed from his chain of command and given a gag order. We covered this last few weeks. Colonel Stewart released a second video about how he stood by his demand for accountability, even though he knows that it would likely mean that he would be imprisoned. After the second video, Colonel Stewart was placed in the Regional Brig for Marine Corps installation east at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, pending an Article 32 preliminary hearing. The Regional Brig is what's known as a Level 1 confinement facility and used for male pretrial prisoners and post-trial prisoners serving sentences of up to 1 year. As of today, October 2nd, he has been confined for over a week without formal charges being filed. The hearing might happen next week, but it was supposed to happen this previous week, and it just got moved. And formal charges are being considered, but the imprisonment of any person, military or otherwise, without knowing what crime they committed is peculiar to say the least. And I think it's really concerning what's going on with Colonel Stewart because Colonel Scheller. There we go. Because that really has a cooling effect on the rest of the military for holding their leaders accountable. And how did we get into the Afghanistan debacle? Well, because the leaders didn't seem to know what they were doing. Milley testified, well, nobody saw this coming. We spent like almost $1 trillion on just the military. Some of that went into military intelligence. We've spent $500 billion on intelligence apparatus the last 10 years, more and more every day. And somehow all of that money, all of that just intelligence capacity to, all these viruses and snooping and hacking phones and listening devices and email scanning and all that stuff, all that money, all that privacy. We had the Patriot Act so that they could scan even more of your stuff, all of that. And Milley said, oh, well, nobody could have predicted that this was going to happen. What do you mean nobody could predict that this was going to happen? We've paid trillions of dollars because you said you needed it to predict stuff like this. If it's true that none of that's producing any fruit, that all of this intelligence apparatus isn't producing actionable information, well, maybe it's time to cancel the NSA. Maybe it's time to cancel the CIA. Maybe it's time to cancel various military intelligence agencies. If they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, we need those, Fox. We have they protect the country. Apparently not. Apparently they don't do what they're told that they say that they're going to do. You might be able to convince me that we have a need for some kind of intelligence agency, and I'm persuadable on that for sure. But to just say, this intelligence agency that we do have that doesn't work at all, well, we need to keep that because the country has a need for an intelligence agency that doesn't provide intelligence. That one I'm not going to be convinced on. That one I'm not really going to be convinced on. So if we have a need for it, great, but we currently don't have the capacity. We currently are, as evident by the Afghanistan debacle, we currently do not have the intelligence agencies producing actionable intelligence. So there really shouldn't be a difference between intelligence agencies producing bad reports and no intelligence agency producing no reports. It might actually be a step up because no information is better than bad information. All right. Our next story is, let's see here. I wanted to change the order of one of these, and okay, there we go. So our next story is about probably us getting kicked off of YouTube for this. The Arizona ballot recount, which had a fun report come out this week. A little bit complicated, so we're going to be reading through the Federalist, which some people have some problems with the Federalist as a newsworthy source, but they did a particularly good job of collecting the facts of what the recount and the audit found. So as with all media sources, you just have to know what the bias is going in and think critically about what you're reading. It's not bad to read biased sources. It's bad to read biased sources without a critical eye. So we'll keep that in mind while we read the Federalist. All right. So Arizona 2020 vote audit finds potentially election-shifting numbers of illegal ballots. So this is obviously talking about the presidential election of 2020. I don't think I needed to reiterate that, but just in case you were wondering. Let's see here. So the Federalist starts off with, on Friday, the Arizona State Senate released the final reports on the results from the Maricopa County forensic election audit. While the reports made several significant findings, supporters supporting former President Trump's complaints about the 2020 election, the corporate media ignored those aspects of the audit to focus instead only on the results of the hand recount. As broadly reported, the audit established that there were no, quote, no substantial differences between the hand count of the ballots provided and the official canvass results for the county. Maricopa County, which represents Arizona's most populated county, thanks to its county seat in Phoenix, had provided Biden a 45,000 vote advantage in the state, propelling Biden to a victory of 10,457 votes. Now, I think that they did not elegantly write this sentence. I think what they meant to say was that within Maricopa County, Biden won Maricopa County by 45,000 votes. And then the statewide total had Biden 10,457 votes ahead, which obviously a lot of those votes, that would have been Maricopa County providing, many of those votes that would throw Biden over the edge for the state vote. Continuing. So the media presented the recount as confirming Biden's victory in the state. Left unmentioned, however, were the numerous findings of problems with the election and, most significantly, evidence indicating tens of thousands of ballots that were illegally cast or illegally counted. A report entitled Compliance with Election Laws and Procedures, issued by the Senate Audit Liaison Ken Bennett, highlighted several issues, of which two were particularly significant because of the number of votes involved. So the report that was released was called the Compliance with Election Laws Procedures, and it listed off several issues with the 2020 election. So let's see here. First, I think I might have lost my spot here. First, Bennett excerpted the Arizona statutory provisions governing early ballots. Those provisions require early ballots to be accompanied by a signed affidavit in which the voter declares he is registered in the appropriate county and has not already voted. The statute further mandates that a voter, quote, must make and sign the affidavit, and directs the early election board to check the voter's affidavit. So basically, if you want to vote early in Arizona, they have a law that says, okay, you can vote early in Arizona, but along with your election ballot, you have to sign an affidavit. And an affidavit, as a legal tool, is basically like a sworn statement that you are legally bounded to. So if you sign an affidavit, you're legally bounded to what it says. So the affidavit says that this vote was cast, and you within your knowledge were casting it in the correct county in which you lived in, and that it wasn't a fraudulent vote, and that you had not already voted somewhere else or in the same place, and that this is not a duplicate vote for you. And so if you sign that affidavit, you're now legally bound to that, and if it turns out that you had signed an affidavit for a fraudulent vote, now you're legally on the hook for it. So it's an extra barrier for this early voting. You can early vote, but because it's kind of an uncontrolled process, you have to sign this legal document that makes sure you're legally bound to making sure that you did this correctly and that you're not intentionally committing fraud against the state. Let's see here. So the Federalist continues. Significantly, quote, if the affidavit is insufficient, the vote shall not be allowed. I believe in this terminology here, the affidavit being insufficient means that something about the affidavit was wrong. Maybe you didn't sign it, or maybe you didn't date it correctly, or maybe it was torn in half, or something happened to it. And there's something about the affidavit that has corrupted its ability to be a legally binding contract. So if you sign the affidavit, or you did it incorrectly and you sent it along with your vote, even though you made an attempt at signing the affidavit, you haven't actually locked yourself into what it says. And so it's like you didn't sign it at all, because it's not binding. There's something wrong with it that made it non-binding. It has to be a binding affidavit that's properly filled out along with your vote for your vote to count. So if the affidavit is insufficient, the vote shall not be allowed. The Secretary of State's Election Procedures Manual reinforces this point by stating, quote, if the early ballot affidavit is not signed, the county recorder shall not count the ballot. So this idea that the affidavit is important to be transmitted along with your ballot is so important that it's stated twice in two different ways, so that it's known. The county recorder shall not count the ballot. The ballot is as if you didn't mail it in, basically. If you didn't do the affidavit correctly, then your vote doesn't count. In his report, Bennett noted that, quote, while the audit scope of work did not include comparing signatures with voter registration records for each voter, so they didn't check to see do the signatures on the affidavit, do those match the signature of the person who was supposed to be signing it? They didn't check that. They did identify a number of missing signatures on ballot envelope affidavits, which to the extent the ballots in such envelopes were tallied, would have violated the above statute. So they found a lot of evidence that it's hard to see, do these signatures match? That's hard. It's easy to see, there's no signature at all. There's just no signature. So the question was, did these envelopes, these affidavits that were not signed, was the accompanying vote, was that tallied? Because if it was tallied, that is against what we had just read here, that if the affidavit is not signed, the county recorder shall not count the ballot. So did they count the ballots for things that weren't signed? We don't know. Let's see here. So although Bennett did not elaborate on the issues related to the affidavit signatures or the number of affected ballots, in a 99-page report, Massachusetts Institute of Technology engineer Dr. Shiva Idunya detailed numerous anomalies. So this person, this MIT engineer, analyzed, I assume he wrote a program or something, analyzed the early voting ballot return envelopes on which voters were required to sign an affidavit within a signature block. That review revealed that more than 17,000 duplicated images of return envelopes. When the duplicates were eliminated from review, this MIT guy's company, EchoMail, concluded that Maricopa County had recorded more than 6,545 early voting return envelopes than what EchoMail determined existed. EchoMail also concluded that another approximately 500 of the envelopes affidavits were left blank. So basically for like this audit, they used this MIT guy, which, I guess that's supposed to mean that he's smart or something. They used a program that he wrote that his company has that basically tried to analyze the signatures, and what the thing decided was that there was 17,000 envelopes that had the same signature on it. Not that there was 17,000 of one signature, but just that presumably there was. Can I do math that quickly? I don't think I can. It was probably 7,000. Yeah, 7,500 of each. Did I get that right? I think so. No, I didn't. Whatever half of 17,000 is. Each whatever that was, that 17,000 of them were duplicates. So you'd probably want to remove about half of those to get to the appropriate number. So did Maricopa County count those twice? It seems so, and because the total count, if you remove the duplicates, EchoMail determined that if you remove the duplicates, well, now there is now Maricopa County's full vote count is too high. That Maricopa County somehow counted 6,545 more votes than what there really was. And the way that they know that there was more than that was more than what there really was is because EchoMail was able to remove the duplicated return envelopes. Now, why were they duplicated? Who knows? It's a great question. Let's see here. The Irundra, we're trying to keep calling the MIT guy, also highlighted several implausible statistics, such as that while 52.6% increase, while there was a 52.6% increase from 2016 to 2020 in the number of early voting ballots, Maricopa County reported a decrease in signature mismatches by 59.7%. This inverse relationship requires explanation, the report noted, and then recommended a full audit of the signatures. So somehow they increased the number of mail-in ballots or early ballots by 52.6%. So there's more early ballots this year than there in 2020 than what there was in 2016. Yet somehow with more ballots, 52.6% more ballots, somehow the number of signature errors went down by almost 60%. You would kind of expect the error rate to stay the same. The error rate should be representative of the sample size. If the sample size grows, the error rate should stay relatively the same, not decrease by 60%. That is a massive statistical anomaly that, as the MIT guy states, is a, quote, an inverse relationship that requires explanation. Yeah, I would agree. Let's see here. Bennett's report on election law compliance highlighted several additional issues, but of particular note, in light of the audit report, was his reference to Arizona's statutory requirements for individuals to be considered eligible. Voters, as delineated in Articles 1, 1.1, and 2 of the Arizona Election Code. They read, quote, the audit identified numerous questions regarding possible ineligible voters, Bennett noted, while adding that because these determinations were made from comparisons between the county's final voted information and private data sources, the cooperation of Maricopa County and further investigation would be necessary to determine whether ineligible persons were actually allowed to vote in the 2020 election. Which they're going to get back to that here in a second. But basically, there seems to be a lot of evidence that there's problems. The audit here didn't reveal less problems. It revealed more problems with the actual votes being counted. So what the Democrats wanted was they wanted to recount the ballots that were there. And a lot of places that we did that, they came up with the same number that they came up with the first time. But the question isn't, did you count the ballots that are here correctly? The question is, are the ballots that are here, are they legal to be counted? And what this analysis found was that there's a lot of ballots mixed into this that appear to have some question about whether or not they were valid votes to begin with. So if you count 100 votes and 10 of them are invalid, if you count them again, you're still going to get to 100. You have to investigate whether or not those 10 that were invalid, if they're really invalid, and then count the valid votes. Let's see here. So the referenced articles of the Election Code discuss voter registration requirements and the requirements for individuals to be registered to vote at their address of residence. Although individuals moving within 29 days of the election remain properly registered to vote in the county in which they previously resided. However, students and members of the military and others temporarily living at another address remain properly registered at their permanent home address. Also of significance is the Arizona Secretary of State's Election Procedures Manual, which, according to the audit, provides, quote, that ballot by mail must be mailed by voters by first-class non-forwardable mail. These statutory provisions and procedures prove significant because the audit revealed that 15,035 mail-in votes in Maricopa County were from voters who had moved prior to the registration deadline. Another 6,591 mail-in votes came from voters who had moved out of Arizona prior to the registration deadline, and 1,718 mail-in votes came in from voters who had moved within Arizona but out of Maricopa County prior to the registration deadline. So a lot of evidence that people who didn't live in Maricopa County were voting in Maricopa County. Oops. Whoopsies. Let's see here. So here's kind of the key takeaway. If you zoned out or weren't listening or weren't following, those are the key takeaway, guys. So one of three scenarios seems possible here. First, the mail-in ballot was delivered to old addresses and then provided to the named voter who had only temporarily relocated. If this is the case for some of these ballots, then such votes would be legal and proper. If the person just wasn't at home the day that it got delivered, somebody received the ballot for them and then gave them the ballot and they voted, that's fine. They just happened to not be home that day. The second possibility is the mail-in ballot was delivered to the old address and then provided to the named voter who had permanently moved but failed to timely update their registration record, yet signed the affidavit attesting to the false address of their previous residence. In such case, the vote would be illegal. The third possibility is that the mail-in ballot was delivered to the old address and then someone other than the named voter cast the vote. Such votes would be both illegal and fraudulent. Neither Maricopa County nor the state of Arizona knows how many of these 23,000 plus votes fall into each of these three scenarios. And that's the problem. Biden won the state by about 10,500 votes. And right now, there's 23,000 votes that are suspect. Some of them could be fraudulent. Maybe all of them are fine. But there's a question, a deep, good question about whether or not these were legal votes. And that needs to be investigated. Because we can't just have full states getting flipped because people were illegally voting. That's not okay. So to kind of put this in context of, okay, let's say, another 2 years goes by and they investigate these 23,000 votes. And let's say Arizona flips back to Trump. What does that mean? So here is the electoral map for, let's see here, for 2020. Yeah, there we go. So here's the electoral map for the final results for 2020. And we can see here we got Arizona's blue. If I flip Arizona back to neutral, it doesn't flip Trump back. It doesn't make Trump president. If something happens in Arizona and it turns out that Arizona was red all along, we find out a year from now, okay, Biden didn't really win Arizona, Trump did. It doesn't change the Electoral College result. And that's one of the problems here is that maybe Trump could have flipped back one state, but he had to flip back a lot. And it's just, again, I think it's definitely, I almost just spilled a ton of water all over my computer, guys. That would have been awesome. I'm going to move this glass. Okay. So I think it's highly fascinating. It's highly relevant whether or not Arizona inappropriately went to Biden, because it highlights a big hole in our election policy if a state can accidentally go to the wrong person, right? That's kind of the key thing about election integrity, is that the states aren't supposed to go to people that they weren't supposed to go to. It's kind of the only reason to have election integrity, right? So if we find out that there's a hole in that process, which it appears that there is, that, even though it would have flipped the country over for Trump, that is a problem. That's a big problem. And it's something that the Republicans need to address at the federal level. Right now, the Democrats are working in the other direction. The Democrats are working to enshrine cheat by mail nationwide. That's what they're doing with their time and power. When the Republicans get power again, and certainly at the state level, they need to be reversing that stuff. They need to be allowing the election to go back to the way that it was, where you go to a place, you've got local people who are handling the ballots, and there's rules, and the rules have to be followed. It can't just be that the states pass laws that ensure, like this affidavit thing, where there's a law that was passed in Arizona that said that you have to sign a legal sworn testament that you are legally casting this vote and you're not frauding the state. And then having laws like that increase election integrity, and then having the federal government or a federal judge come in and say, well, we're just going to ignore that law. You can't have that. You can't have that. Because if it happened in Arizona, it could have happened in Wisconsin. But look at it. It still doesn't matter. Even in Wisconsin, it doesn't matter. I think it's pretty obvious something like that happened in Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania had a lot of goofy stuff going on there too. And it seems like, similar to Wisconsin, where they just had that weird jump from 100,000 votes at 4:52 a.m., where all of a sudden Biden just jumped up 100,000 votes somehow. That was a little strange. I think that needs to be looked into. Is it the same reason why Arizona's vote was off? No, it's probably its own unique flavor of election unintegrity. And let's look at Pennsylvania. What if Pennsylvania was flipped the wrong way? Well, that might actually get you back. If we flip Pennsylvania back to blue, look at Georgia. Georgia, it gets you really close. I think it's right at the edge. So you've got some issues where it just doesn't matter, right? This is important because it highlights nationwide the problem with what the Democrats did for the quote-unquote pandemic election. It highlights flaws in the process that need to be addressed. What this is not, and you're going to have to just deal with it, unfortunately. What this is not stage one of Trump becoming president this term. Maybe if he runs next time. But this Arizona ballot thing is not going to lead to that. And unfortunately, you have a lot of people where that's a really provocative thing to say, right? It's like, oh, okay, we're going to get Arizona, and that's just, then we're going to get Wisconsin, then we'll get Pennsylvania or Georgia, and then Trump's going to be president. That's not a rational end goal. Would I love if Trump was president right now? I think I do. Do I think that it's reasonable that he's going to become president off of this? I don't think so. I'm just not seeing it. But like I said, the importance of this is that this needs to be highlighted as an issue with election integrity, a issue with election integrity that was caused by the Democrats, that was caused by federally appointed judges that are left-leaning, city-level people that are making these arbitrary decisions because they are all being funded by various left-wing institutions to go be ballot harvesters or be counting the votes and all that stuff and being election officials and all that stuff. That's what needs to be focused on. But unfortunately, that's not nearly as sexy as saying, Trump could be president again if we just keep doing this. This Arizona thing's going to really flip the whole country over. It's not going to do it. It's not going to flip the country back, unfortunately. But it is important, and a smart Republican would be able to figure that out and understand how to properly use this information, though I don't know if there's many smart Republicans anymore. Alrighty, so our next story is actually the story after the next story because I want to do them in a different order, I've decided. Alright, so we have an update on closing the government. But first, I have to take a drink of water. Direwolf Media, sponsored by water. Keeps you, parched or unparched. There you go. All right. So, Democrat spending. So we talked about last week the government getting closed, possibly on the horizon, and I made my case that let's just close the government. There's not really a point to it. So the Democrats. One of the reasons why I would like to close the government is because the Democrats have so much spending planned. They have so much spending planned that they've actually got 2 whole bills. They couldn't even pack it into one bill because there was so much spending. They've got 2 major bills for their new spending plans. The one bill is a smaller actual infrastructure bill that is going to be building highways and broadband and cybersecurity and green crap and putting regulations into the energy sector, all that kind of stuff. That infrastructure bill is priced out at $1.5 trillion. There is a second bill that the Democrats are calling human infrastructure, because everything's infrastructure. Your infrastructure. You're not a person. You're a body. You're human infrastructure. The second bill is what the Dems are calling human infrastructure. The actual name of the bill is the Build Back Better Act. That's not ominous at all. This bill is priced out at $3.5 trillion, but more reasonable analyses have pegged it closer to $5.5 trillion, maybe even higher. The smaller $1.5 trillion bill has a, quote, bipartisan support and passed the Senate last week with about 20 Republicans who, in voting for the bipartisan Build Back Better bill, the infrastructure bill, these 20 Republicans that voted for it in the quote-unquote bipartisan support, they've identified themselves as wanting to be primaried. This bill was then sent off to Nancy in the House, and according to Nancy last week, she was hoping to get the House version of the smaller infrastructure bill passed on Monday. This, however, Nancy's plans, her best-laid plans, in fact, were thwarted by progressive Democrats in the House, like AOC. AOC's group said that they would not vote for the smaller $1.5 trillion bill unless the larger $5.5 trillion bill was also going to pass the Senate. Sensing that Nancy, sensing that she did not have enough votes, pushed the vote off from Monday to Thursday. However, the progressives, like AOC, held firm that it was either all the spending or none of the spending, which for me was a pretty easy ultimatum. If that's what they really want, all the spending or none of the spending, that's an easy ultimatum for me to pick. None of the spending, thank you. So because they held firm, Nancy also canceled the Thursday vote in the House. Oof. Because the progressives have gridlocked the House, focus has now shifted to trying to get the $5.5 trillion Build Back Better Act through the Senate, where it has no bipartisan support. It actually has bipartisan opposition. After that critical Georgia runoff at the beginning of the year, where a bunch of fucking idiots who didn't vote in the runoff for the Republicans because a bunch of other fucking idiots told them that their vote didn't matter. That didn't have any consequences for sure. Because of that, the Georgia runoff Senate race gave the Senate a 50-50 split of Republicans and Democrats, and that meant that Vice President Harris had the tie-breaking vote. However, for the Build Back Better Act, 2 Democrats who were elected in red states have thrown their lot in with the Republicans to block the Build Back Better Act. The bipartisan resistance of 52 senators nullifies Kamala Harris's tie-breaking vote, and there does not seem to be any way of passing the $5.5 trillion Build Back Better Act through the Senate, which means the progressives in the House will continue not passing the $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill. Oh, the humanity. How terrible. Wow. So if we don't pass the if we don't pass the $5.5 trillion bill, we also don't pass the $1.5 trillion bill. Oh no. That's terrible. Thanks, AOC. I think it's just absolutely hilarious. I think it's really funny because this is exactly what I want. This week, the government is, for the first time in a long time, this week, the government is functioning as intended. It has gridlocked itself to the point of being unable to spend your money, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. It's a good thing. So we've kind of prior to this moment in time, it seemed pretty obvious that the Democrats just hated us. They hate conservatives. They hate Republicans. They hate most of centrist America. They really hate anybody that isn't an elitist or a total shill for them. They really hate the ideals of this country. And it's unfortunately becoming more and more clear because they're getting more and more blatant about it. Something that you kind of sensed early on, but last couple of years, certainly the last couple of months here, it's become very obvious that they just despise you. Let's take Bernie Sanders, for instance. Well, Bernie Sanders is a sweet old man, right? He can't possibly hate somebody. Of course he can't. He's a communist. So Bernie Sanders tweeted this out, talking about the $5.5 trillion Build Back Better Act getting stuck in the Senate because 50 Republican senators and 2 Democrat senators bipartisanly opposed it. This is how Bernie Sanders views the situation.
2 senators cannot be allowed to defeat what 48 senators and 210 House members want. We must stand with the working families of our country. We must combat climate change. We must delay passing the infrastructure bill until we pass a strong reconciliation bill.
So the way Bernie sees it is that not 52 senators blocking 48 senators. He sees it as 2 senators blocking 48 senators, which is just objectively not true. It's 50 Republicans and 2 Democrats blocking 48 Democrats. How else is the government supposed to work? But Bernie will tweet this out that, it's only 2 senators. It's 2 senators are somehow able to hold up the majority. How can we, if you look at Bernie's tweet here, it looks like there's only 50 members of the Senate when we all know that I don't know, maybe you guys know. I think I know. You guys know that there's 100 members in the Senate. Maybe people who voted for Bernie Sanders and follow him on Twitter don't know that there's 100 members in the Senate. Maybe they think that there's only 50. Because the way Bernie's putting it is that there's only 50 senators, and somehow only 2 of them are able to block 48. Well, that's just not democracy. And what this reveals here is that Bernie Sanders does not see the Republicans as a valid part of the government. That's the only way to read this, is that the 50 Republican senators are just not a valid form of the government. They're not valid senators. The only valid senators are Democrats. And because of his thought process in that, he's just so confused. How can only 2 of the Democrats defeat the other 48? That's crazy. And the reason why is because he's not doing the math correctly, because he refuses to acknowledge that the Republicans are real people, that they exist, and that they have valid Senate seats. So as I said, the rejection and the opposition to the Build Back Better Act is bipartisan. It's got bipartisan resistance. And Bernie thinks that bipartisan resistance, well, that's just un-American. How can we possibly have that? I sincerely hope that this just keeps failing. I think that this is hilarious. I hope that it stays gridlocked in Congress forever, at least until midterms. This is supposed to be Biden's legacy, and I hope that it just, I hope that it remains that the Afghanistan withdrawal is Biden's legacy, not spending, what was that, $7 trillion. Jesus Christ. All right. Underwriting the entire issue of these bills, these giant spending bills, $7 trillion worth of spending. Underwriting all of this is the issue of the debt ceiling, which we talked a bit about last week. This week, Janet Yellen, who is currently the Treasury Secretary and formerly the chair of the Federal Reserve Bank, this week was advocating to Congress during a hearing for the complete removal of the debt ceiling. The complete removal of the debt ceiling would grant the executive branch an unlimited ability to borrow money from the Federal Reserve, which, as we know, has no money. It merely prints the money. So it's kind of funny. It's kind of on the nose that the former Federal Reserve chair is advocating for a policy that would remove any restrictions from the Federal Reserve's ability to print money and inflate the currency. It's not a corrupt or perverse incentive model at all. There's supposed to be, and it's always been a lie, but there's supposed to be kind of this image that the Treasury and the Federal Reserve are like separate entities, and they're not, and they haven't been since the Federal Reserve was created. But they were supposed to look like that. It was propaganda, right? It was this piece of propaganda that would keep the populace at bay, and believe that their government wasn't as corrupt as it was. But Janet Yellen was 12 months ago. Janet Yellen was the chair of the Federal Reserve, deciding how much money it was going to print this week. And this year, she's the head of the Treasury, advocating that we just remove the brakes completely from the Federal Reserve. No. So Republicans should continue blocking the bills, and the Republicans should not allow, to the best of their ability, they should not allow the debt limit to be expanded, and they should let the government shut down. And I want to get into the reason for that in a second here, but also I want to give some concrete ways that the Republicans could actually continue blocking this. So as of right now, the Build Back Better Act is getting sliced up a little bit. They're trying to negotiate to see if they can get those 2 Democrats to sign on to it. And they're doing various things by cutting things out, reducing the dollar value, changing how much money they're going to give away to their districts, all that sort of stuff. And so it's possible that next week or the week after they'll come to some kind of agreement, and they'll get their 2 Democrats to come back to vote for the bill, and then there'll be a tie, and then Kamala Harris will break the tie. But that doesn't mean that the Republicans can't stop blocking it. Well, how would the Republicans stop blocking it, right? There'd be 50 versus 50, and then Kamala would break the tie. So Fox, how could the Republicans possibly keep blocking that? Well, the bill has to still go through the amendment process. And this is a little parliamentarian trick that I talked about a couple of months ago as tangible things that the or that the Republicans could do to continue holding up the Biden agenda. So there's this idea of the filibuster, right? Which we kind of know about the filibuster. Basically, debate in the Senate can go on forever. And as long as you continue talking, you can keep the floor and keep debate going forever. And it requires 60 votes to forcibly shut down debate. And so if you don't have 60 votes and somebody wants to keep holding the floor to talk and quote unquote debate a bill, they can just debate it forever and the bill never passes, right? So that's called a filibuster. There's another process, and the Democrats want to get rid of the filibuster, but there's another process that allows Republicans to hold the floor nearly forever, and that's the amendment process. And this is not a thing that's been used really ever in the way that I'm suggesting, but it's been proposed that it could be. And I really think that the Republicans need to grow some balls and actually start blocking the Democrats. Just full scale, lock up the government, end all of this spending insanity, and lock it all down. And this is the way that they can do it. So there's a process for amendments for bills. So the Build Back Better Act is coming up for the amendment process, right? So when they amend it, a senator can propose an amendment. And there's a little loophole here where there is no limit on how long the amendment can be. And it is required, should the senator proposing it desire, that the amendment be read in its entirety. And so what you could have is senators proposing amendments that are 10, 20, 50, 100,000 pages long of nonsense. Phone books from every city. You could put in books, all kinds of, put the Constitution in there 70 times. You could do all kinds of different things. Just put text on paper and submit it as an amendment, and then force it to be read aloud on the Senate floor. You could have the entire Senate locked up for a whole year, 2 years if you wanted. You could get us out to midterms by submitting amendments in that fashion, and just there's no limit on submitting amendments either. So it's funny to me because there's so much hubbub about the filibuster when there's this really just absolutely elegant way of, you don't really need the filibuster to lock up the bill. You just keep adding these absurdly long amendments with nonsense in them. I mean, most of the bill is made out of nonsense anyway. So, adding a book, like, maybe a fun book would be the Creature from Jekyll Island. Just publish the Creature from Jekyll Island in its entirety into the bill and force them to read out the book on the Senate floor. That would be hilarious. There's any number of books I could think of that would be fun to do that with. And that would require the Republicans to actually have a commitment to blocking the Biden agenda. But the Republicans don't have a commitment to blocking the Biden agenda. They have a commitment to looking like they do so that you vote for them like an idiot next time. And then they'll go back and do nothing. They'll pretend like they're doing something, and they'll come back and you'll say, well, I don't know, there's no other better candidates to vote for, so I guess I'll just keep voting for them. And it's not that it's your fault. It's just how our system's set up. But if there are Republicans out there who do mean business, who do mean to block the Biden agenda, this is a perfectly valid way that they could do it. And they don't, and I don't know why. I can't see any drawback to it other than I guess the Democrats would do the same thing, but I really don't care. I really don't care. If the result of this is that the Republicans block and just completely lock up the Senate for a year and a half until midterms, and the result of that is what the Democrats say, well, we're going to do that too. We're going to lock up the whole good. Let's have let's just totally have the legislature be paralyzed for the rest of time. I think that would be perfectly fine. That's a totally acceptable outcome from my perspective. Let's just keep that going forever. There's I talked about this on the show a really long time ago, but there's actually this little known provision in the Constitution. I'm being serious. I know it sounds a little sarcastic, but there's actually a real little known provision in the Constitution that mandates that Congress must meet at least once per year. And it's funny to me because the founding fathers, when they were authoring the Constitution, in their minds, at a certain point in the future, Congress would have written all the laws that it needed to write, and then they would just be done. They would have no more laws to create, no more laws to write, and they would be so done that they would have no reason to convene for up to a year at a time. And so they thought it necessary to add in the Constitution, well, you can't just have the government shut down or, not convening forever. So like you need to convene and just say hi to each other at least once a year. And I just think it was so cute and really optimistic. I thought it was optimistic that the founding fathers thought that we would get to a point where Congress was done with legislation and would have to be forced by the Constitution to convene at least once per year. That's so optimistic of the founding fathers to have thought like that, and I long for that time. So back to my point, if this amendment process, if the Republicans can exploit that for the next year and a half to get us to midterms, and then it turns out, the Democrats are going to start exploiting that too, and just the Senate never functions again for the rest of the future, I'm fine with that. That's the future the founding fathers imagined for us, so I'm fine with that. All right. Let's see here. So, in general, other than just having the government just seize up like an engine you poured bleach into, because that would be fantastic. The other way to seize up the government is to just shut it down, because also this amendment process would presumably prevent the budget from ever being passed again, which would also shut down the government. So there's just only pros and no cons to this idea I have of locking up the Senate. We should definitely, this needs to become a national movement. So as I've said, I think the government needs to shut down because what does the government do? I mean, we have the FBI running psyops and creating fraudulent terrorist plots to, pretending that they're Republicans, creating false flag events. You've got the ATF, basically declaring half your arsenal as illegal and the other half they just haven't gotten to yet. You've got the Department of Education. That's, a story we didn't cover this week was, some of the approved reading lists for the Department of Education include books that are essentially pedophile books that are describing pedophiles, harming children, and they propose it in a good light. That's a whole other story that we didn't get to. But you have all these different things going on. And again, I mean, if you want a list of all of the things that the government's doing that's, harming your liberties, I guess just see literally the entire Direwolf Media catalog. But in my mind, I don't see the government as providing the function that it's supposed to provide, mainly the one outlined in the Constitution that's meant to provide for the national integrity of the Union, and it just doesn't even do that. And also to defend the Constitution, which it doesn't do really either anymore. So in my mind, a non-functional government that's shut down is far better than a dysfunctional government that's harming my liberties. But this, if you want a much more specific reason why it's good for the government shut down, let's read this Politico article, just a short excerpt from it, because it really, really seals the deal as to why should the government shut down. So from Politico, they have this opinion piece called "Don't Believe the Democrats When They Say the $3.5 Trillion Bill Costs Nothing. That ranks among the most shameless attempts to change reality through a talking point ever attempted." Oh boy. Wow, Nancy. All that plastic surgery, and she still looks like that. Jesus. Let's see here. There's a quote from Nancy here that they've got. "It's not about the dollar amount," House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said. "It's the dollar amount, as the president said, is zero. This bill will be paid for." It's $3.5 trillion, really $5.5 trillion. And the dollar amount for buying $5.5 trillion worth of stuff is apparently zero. Okay, so Politico says if the Democrats get their reconciliation bill, it won't be because they convince the American public that the true cost is zero. As the political prospects of the bill have sagged, and Democrats have realized that President Joe Biden's agenda is wildly overambitious. That's an understatement. They're trying to recalibrate by arguing that a generational spending binge won't really cost anything at all. Citing provisions to offset the spending, Biden said last week that the bill is, quote, going to cost nothing. At a Wednesday news conference, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi repeated this argument with great confidence. Quote, it's not about the dollar amount, she told reporters. Quote, the dollar amount, as the president said, is zero. This bill will be paid for. White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain previewed this line at the SALT conference in New York City a couple of weeks ago. Quote, the net cost of Build Back Better is zero, and sympathetic journalists have picked up the mantra. Trying to redefine the cost of a $3.5 trillion bill as zero must rank among the most shameless, patently absurd attempts to change reality through a talking point ever attempted. It's mind-bending logic that would mystify Lewis Carroll at the height of his creative powers. It's the kind of reasoning you'd expect any bankrupt person or someone blissfully unaware that he or she is about to go bankrupt. It is the equivalent in its transparent, willful implausibility of Donald Trump's pledge that Mexico would somehow at the time, despite all of its denials, pony up and pay for the border wall. Good job, Politico. You really, Politico trying to redeem itself. They're going real hard at the Democrats right now, and then they're trying to redeem themselves. They're like, yeah, it's almost as bad as Trump. Politico, never change. All right, they continue. The fact is that spending money is, by definition, spending money. I don't know, is it? I mean, we had Merriam-Webster changing the definition of words in real time last year during a congressional hearing. So it's I don't know. Is the definition of spending money still spending money? It might not be. Politico might get fact checked on that. So the reason why they are saying, the reason why Nancy and Biden are saying that it costs $0 is because they are offsetting the spending with tax collection. But that doesn't cost $0. That costs $5.5 trillion of your tax dollars. So that's not $0. It costs $5.5 trillion. Spending $5.5 trillion is, by definition, spending $5.5 trillion. I feel really weird having to explain this, but Nancy's a 2-year-old, so she doesn't get it. The Democrats, the reason why I think the government, this goes back into why I said government, just shut it down. I don't care what we lose, just shut it down. They think, the Democrats and the government think, that as long as they are taxing you, they've taxed you, taxing us, $5.5 trillion, as long as they collect $5.5 trillion from us in taxes, that the bill is just free. It doesn't cost anything. No cost at all. That $5.5 trillion, government didn't spend it. You spent it. So it's free to the government, not free to you. Which isn't even really true, because if it really cost zero, we wouldn't need to raise the debt ceiling to borrow money for it. So there's kind of this paradox here where the bill cost $0. Okay, so the Democrats, the progressive Democrats and the mainstream Democrats, they're fighting over how many $1 trillion they want to spend in total. But it's kind of funny because it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter how many trillions of dollars they're spending, because they're not spending any money at all. They're both bills are spending $0, right? That's what Nancy just said. That's what Biden just said. So it's funny because there's a paradox there where there's different kinds of zero, apparently. Some zeros are more expensive than others. And then also there's a problem with the debt ceiling, that we can't pass either of these bills without increasing the debt ceiling because, well, they cost money that we're going to have to borrow. But Nancy said it costs $0. So if it costs $0, why do we got to raise the debt ceiling? I don't know. There's some contradictions here. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if zero really means what Nancy thinks it means. Let's see here. So long as you exist, so long as you, the American taxpayer, exist to tax dollars from, to extract dollars of tax from, Nancy will say that the bill cost you $0. So as long as you're there to pay for it, Well, it cost $0 to Nancy. It cost you money, but it didn't cost Nancy any money. It's $0 for Nancy. So, I guess it costs $0. This is like saying that if you go to buy 5 gallons of gas and you hand the attendant $20, that it cost you $0 because the gas has already been paid for. You paid for the gas. So, I mean, it costs $0, right? No, it costs $20. If you're spending $5.57 trillion on God knows what they're spending it on. If you're spending $7 trillion, you're spending $7 trillion. It costs $7 trillion. The fact that you've extracted $7 trillion or planning to extract $7 trillion worth of tax revenue out of the population, that doesn't mean it doesn't cost $7 trillion. That means that it actually costs $7 trillion. I feel like an idiot. I felt stupid writing this because it seems so obvious. I feel even stupider saying it, but I guess that's the state of our politics now. I thought the Democrats were supposed to like elevate the state of politics. They're supposed to be all the smart ones, but I guess not. So why should we shut down the government? Well, for all the reasons I've listed before, but especially because of this Politico article. The government, or because of this idea that the $7 trillion worth of bills cost you $0. The government, as it stands, only exists to extract wealth from you. The government only exists to extract wealth from you. Why? What reason is there to keep it open? What reason is there to keep open a government whose only purpose is to extract wealth from you? Why? So I say, don't increase the debt ceiling. Let's default now rather than later. Get it out of the system. Let it do what it's going to do to the economy. It's going to do it eventually. Let's just do it now. And let's lock up the spending. Let's, to the extent that we can keep the government open, lock up the Senate. Let's use the amendment process to just freeze all Senate activity for the rest of the time. We're at that point. We are at that point where the absence of a system is preferable to the current iteration of the system. The current iteration of the system is so infringing on your liberty, is so burdensome to your ability to generate and maintain wealth, that the absence of it is preferable to any imagined benefit or security that it provides for you. Let's see here. So our next story, which was actually the previous story, but I decided I wanted to move them around a little bit because the next story is about the Federal Reserve, who we just talked about. Janet Yellen was 12 months ago. She was the head of the Federal Reserve, and now she's the head of the Treasury. It's crazy. But when she left, she left 12 other or 13 other Federal Reserve chairs, one for each district, well, they've been busy this week. So we have a story from NPR. I don't know if we've ever done a story from NPR on this show. I guess there's a first time for everything, right? But it's from NPR, so you know it's true. Let's see here. So NPR, they say 2 top Federal Reserve officials have retired after trading disclosures. Hey, man, the Wolf of Wall Street, he didn't get to retire after the financial crash. The Federal Reserve chair, they shouldn't retire either. All right. Let's see here. So the NPR says from Washington, in a rare moment of ethical controversy for the Federal Reserve, which is just absolutely hilarious on its own because the entire entity of the Fed is itself an ethical controversy. Like it's like state of being is itself. The entire fabric of it is sown from ethical controversy, and somehow it's rare that ethical controversies are actually like acknowledged from this entity who is made of the fabric of ethical controversy. So in a rare moment of ethical controversy for the Federal Reserve, 2 top officials resigned on Monday in the wake of revelations about their financial trading that exposed potential shortcomings in the Fed's rules on investments. Eric Rosengren, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, said he would step down this week for health reasons. Yeah, I'm sure him getting caught insider trading made his heart go pitter patter, and that was pretty health conscious of him to step down. Meanwhile, Robert Kaplan, the president of the Dallas Federal Reserve, said he would resign on October 8th to avoid becoming a, quote, distraction from the Federal Reserve's broader mission. The two officials' financial disclosures sparked criticism from government watchdogs after they revealed extensive stock trading in 2020, when the Fed was spending trillions of dollars, printing NPR. The Fed has no money to spend. They can print money. They have no money to spend. The Federal Reserve Bank, as a little aside here, the Federal Reserve Bank is a triple lie. The Federal Reserve Bank is not a federal entity. It has no reserves, and it is not a bank. So they did a really great job naming it Federal Reserve Bank, but it's none of those things. It's literally not any. They had 3 words, and it's 0 out of 3. So, I guess good job. Maybe they can print some more words and try and get it back. Let's see here. So the Federal Reserve was printing trillions of dollars, stabilizing the financial markets, and boosting the economy. Because of their trading, the two officials could potentially have profited from the Federal Reserve's actions. They definitely profited from the Fed's actions. Through the investments by Rosengren and Kaplan, though the investments by Rosengren and Kaplan were permitted under the Fed's rules, they raised at least the appearance of conflicts of interest, which Fed policy discourages. Wow, this is a very generous take here, NPR. Senator Elizabeth Warren, a Massachusetts Democrat, sharply criticized the trades and called for a ban on stock ownership by Fed officials, which I agree with. I agree with that. Federal Chair Jerome Powell will testify on Tuesday before the Senate Banking and Housing and Urban Affairs Committee, which includes Warren, and will likely face questioning about the Fed's ethics rules. The resignations will give Powell a specific response if he can point. He can point to, observers said. So these two Fed chairs, these two Fed boys that were insider trading off of Federal Reserve decisions, their resignation will in itself be the response that Federal Reserve Chair Powell can point to and say, oh, well, we are holding ourselves accountable. There's no need to change the rules. There's no need to make a rule saying that Federal Reserve chairs can't trade stocks anymore. Let's not get hasty, because Kaplan and Rosenberg or whatever, they insider traded last year when all that market volatility, a lot of that market volatility caused by the Federal Reserve moving money around or printing money, and they made their money. They made their money last year. You didn't. You probably lost your job, or your house went crazy prices, or your savings is worth nothing now. Screw you. But they made their money, and now they can resign. They don't need their fancy position anymore. They already made their money out of it. Let's get 2 new people in there so they can also insider trade too. And then when they make their money, they can also quote unquote resign. The system's working as intended. No, so they're gonna say, oh well, they resigned, and that's punishment enough, isn't it? No. Punishment enough is seizing all of the money they made in 2020. That would be the punishment. Okay, so let's see your quote. The departure of Rosengren and Kaplan should ease pressure on Powell, who notably failed to express confidence in the two presidents. At a news conference last week, said Keisha Gunra, an analyst at the investment bank of Evercore ISI. The presidents of the 12 regional banks participate in the Fed's private policy-making meetings, in which they discuss the central bank's interest rate policies and are privy to economic data not always available to the public. The Fed's decisions can cause sharp swings in financial markets, so can the president's speeches and comments to the media. And they mean the Federal Reserve Chair, the Federal Reserve presidents of each branch. Their speeches and comments to the media can swing markets substantially. Fed Chair Jerome Powell said last week that the Fed would change its ethics policy in the wake of the disclosures, yet the Fed may still face pressure to allow an outside investigation into whether the two officials or any others traded based on inside information about the Fed's actions. Quote, after this egregious breach of public trust, nothing but a full investigation and a referral to the SEC, the Security and Exchanges Commission, is acceptable, said Jeff Hauser, director of the Revolving Door Project, a nonprofit group that monitors government appointments. Yeah, you want to see a revolving door. You get Janet Yellen going right out of Fed chair, right into Treasury Secretary. That's a hell of a revolving door. Last year, Kaplan made trades worth at least $1 million in 22 stocks and index funds, including Amazon, Chevron, Facebook, and Johnson & Johnson. Amazon, Johnson & Johnson. Let's see here. We're going to go in Chevron. We'll go. Chevron's not as obvious, but I'll get back to that. So Amazon. So everybody, part of the decision last year was let's lock down the economy. Let's do 15 days to slow the spread. Let's shut down entire economic sectors and reduce the number of people who can go to actual store locations. Oh, everybody's going to order from Amazon. Let's invest in Amazon. Johnson & Johnson. Oh, well, we got the it's this big pandemic going on, and I'm sure the Trump presidency discussed the Operation Warp Speed with the Fed beforehand, because Operation Warp Speed was a very expensive project and we borrowed directly to fund it. And I bet you some of those discussions prior to the announcement of Operation Warp Speed, I bet you that it was discussed at some of these Fed chair meetings that, we're going to borrow, the American government's going to borrow directly from the Fed and pump it directly into Johnson & Johnson and then mandate the vaccine. I wonder if I should dump some stock in there. Chevron is a chemical company. They make chemicals, which I don't know this for positive, but I would assume that Chevron chemicals at some point are ending up in hand sanitizers or different kind of cleaning supplies, right? At the very least, they are a raw supplier to other companies that would process petrochemicals into these other derivative products. Facebook, who knows on that one? Facebook's probably just not a bad stock pick, but who knows? But these other ones seem pretty obvious, right? All right. So, the Federal Reserve is approaching a critical point in our economic recovery as it debates the future path of monetary policy, Kaplan said in a written statement. Unfortunately, the recent focus on my financial disclosure risks becoming a distraction. Kaplan said that he would resign on October 8th. He should resign to prison. That's where you go when you insider trade like that. Let's see here. So the rest of this kind of just goes through more of the specifics on his trades, which are interesting to me. They're less relevant to the core of the story, and the core of the story is that the Federal Reserve is obviously corrupt, as we all know. I don't think that was a surprise to anybody. And the interesting part about this is that there is currently no rule that prevents insider trading. These two presidents that were caught, they weren't forced out. They weren't arrested. They weren't investigated by the government. They were just, they got caught and they resigned, and they're just going to go about their day with all the money that they made off the insider trading. And then two new presidents will come in and they'll probably do the same thing. And, it's a system working as intended. Nobody gets held accountable. And, as soon as they make their money, it's like, I guess I'm done making my money now, and I'll just go about my day. See you later. And no one ever gets held accountable. There is no justice. Let's see here. So let's see. There is another one. This guy. So this is another Federal Reserve chair who's different from the two that we just talked about. Bloomberg's reporting that Claridia traded into stocks on the eve of Powell's pandemic statement. So this is from yesterday. So Bloomberg. So Federal Reserve Vice Chair Richard Cladria traded between $1 million and $5 million out of a bond fund into stock funds one day before Chair Jerome Powell issued a statement flagging possible policy action as the pandemic worsened. His 2020 financial disclosure now shows. Let's get me down here. So, here. Caledra's trades described in forms filed with the Government Ethics Office showed the shifting of funds out of a PIMCO bond fund on February 27th, 2020, and on the same day buying the PIMCO Stock Plus fund in the iShares MSCI USA Min Vol Factor exchange traded fund in similar dollar ranges. For the year, he listed 5 transactions. The following day, on February 28th, at a Friday at 2:30 p.m., Powell took the unusual step of releasing a statement saying the virus poses, quote, evolving risks to economic activity in the same statement. Powell said the Fed was, quote, closely monitoring developments and their implications for the economic outlook. So basically, you've got the Federal Reserve, the head of it, saying, making a statement, and on a Friday, late in the day. So 2:30. So trading day in America, Eastern Standard Time. Trading day on Friday is going to end at 4:30 p.m. Powell's making a statement at 2:30 p.m. on a Friday. Trading's not going to open back up till 9 a.m. the next Monday. So you're putting out this dire financial information, evolving economic risks, late on a Friday. So the market's going to go crazy. The market's just going to, and it probably did. I didn't look up what the movements were that day, but you can be assured that the market was going crazy from that, because people are trying to make their moves for that last hour and a half. Presuming that his speech took 30 minutes, they got about an hour and a half to just move as much money as they can around, and that's going to create wild swings in volatility because people want to move their money around on Friday before the markets close, and they have to wait until Monday to do it. And the day before that, you've got this Fed chair guy who would be, Powell's not going to be making a speech that he didn't consult with other people on, other Fed people on. So this other vice chair would have known that this announcement was going to come out, and so he moved funds around. Now I don't know what PIMCO does, and it doesn't really matter, but he moved up to $5 million around to different funds the day before there was a large announcement that, there's going to be some crazy, a large announcement that was going to make the stock market move. So this just highlights that, it's all insider trading. I mean, this is how, Congress makes their money. Is you've got basically all the everybody in Congress, somehow Nancy's worth $100 million now. They're all doing insider trading. Everybody's doing it. Sometimes we catch them, sometimes we don't. And as you saw from the previous story, there's no guardrails on it. There's no rules. When they get caught doing it, it's a little bit embarrassing, but I could probably stomach some embarrassment for a couple $1 million. Having a trade that nets me a couple $1 million. I could stomach a little embarrassment for that. And that's all they get. And they're not even really embarrassed. They're just laughing at you, saying, ha, 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 ha. They think they got us, and we'll just resign, and the media will say that's good enough, and then we can all move on with our lives, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. So they're just laughing at you. It's okay. That's why I say, shut it all down. What's funny is if the government can't borrow any more money, the Federal Reserve can't print any more money. It's almost like my shut down the government approach solves a lot of problems. I think I'm onto something. I'm going to start a new party called the Shut Down the Government Party. Alrighty, so... Oh, you know what? I thought I was reliably informed by myself that all of the slides were done, but I think I forgot one for the last story here. But that's okay, because I've got some news articles. All right, so we're going to do a segment that we haven't done in a while called Hate Hoax, as they all are. And first, we're going to have the shot, which is shot chaser here. The shot is from the AP. Chesterfield, Missouri. Several hundred students at a suburban St. Louis high school staged a walkout after racist graffiti was found in two separate Parkway high schools. Students at Parkway Central High School walked out of class in protest on Thursday, a day after the racial slurs were found in the boys' bathroom in Parkway Central and Parkway North. Students and staff have said it's not the first time racist speech was disrupted operations at the school. Parkway Superintendent Keith Marty said in a letter that school and police investigations have been launched into the latest incident. Parkway Central students who walked out on Thursday stood outside the administrative building on campus chanting, "No justice, no peace," and shared their experiences with racism at the school through a megaphone. There was no walkout at Central North on Thursday, administrators there said. So that was the shot. Oh my gosh. So we have a hate crime. People wrote racist slurs in the bathroom with magic marker. Oh my gosh. We gotta stage a walkout. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. And here's the chaser. If it loads.
And a Fox 2 follow-up now on a huge story from last week. Parkway Central High School says racist graffiti found on restroom walls last Wednesday was put there by one black male student.
Ooh.
The student admitted to writing the hateful messages. The Parkway District says he will face severe discipline, but they won't say exactly what that is due to confidentiality. Superintendent Dr. Keith Marty says we remain hurt by the actions of this student as it does not represent the values of our community. Last week was difficult for many of our students and staff. You can read the full letter on Fox 2 Now.
Oh no. The white supremacist was black man. Oh gosh. Who could have seen that coming? Surely nobody could have seen that coming because that's never happened before. No way. So here's an article from The Spectator, which I'm not very familiar with them. But once again, as we talked about before, it doesn't matter if you're reading a biased source. You just got to have a critical eye. And I read through this, and I think it's perfectly fine here. So from The Spectator, a black student at Parkway Central High School in Chesterfield, Missouri, admitted to writing racist graffiti in a school bathroom, including a slur against black people, school district officials said on Tuesday. Students at multiple high schools in the St. Louis area walked out of class last week to protest the message. Quote, "We are tired. We are angry. We need change," sophomore Shiana Allen told Parkway Central High School principal Tim McCarthy through a megaphone. Yeah, I don't think it's a hot take. It's just honest take. I agree. I am tired and angry, and I think it needs to change that black people continue terrorizing the black community. This black girl is, she's tired and angry and thinks that it needs to change, that people of her skin color are outrageously statistically much more likely to be harassed or harmed or killed by somebody else who has their same skin color. That's all FBI stats. And I agree. I'm tired that black people are continuously murdering other black people at a substantially higher rate than any other race. I'm angry about it, and I think it needs to change. Now this sophomore, Allen, I don't think that she realized that's what she was saying. If she had, more than a sophomoric understanding of the world and reality, maybe she would realize that. But, whether or not she meant her words to be taken that way, I still think that she's technically correct. The Parkway Central protest included about 1,000 students. According to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, some students, quote, cursed and shouted at school administrators while circling them. Oof. I bet they were surprised. So your student, Paige Primoski, was in tears as she said, quote, "School is supposed to be a safe place." Her classmates placed hands on her shoulders to confront her. The racist graffiti at Parkway Central even included a death wish upon black people, which, again, that seems to make sense, especially coming from St. Louis. I believe St. Louis is the second only to Chicago in just black on black genocide, just absolute slaughter of thousands of black people every year at the hands of other black people. So, I guess it's not that weird that a St. Louis black man would be wishing death upon other black people. That seems, kind of in step with what the culture is in that region. Superintendent Keith Marty said in a letter to students, parents, and teachers that their culprit's race, quote, does not diminish the hurt it caused or the negative impact it has on our entire community. Yeah, it doesn't matter that it wasn't an actual white supremacy attack. It just, it speaks to this deeper truth of what could have happened. It says a lot about what could have happened that, it didn't really happen. The fact that it didn't happen actually says a lot about what it meant if it could have happened, because it might have happened, but it didn't happen. But, we wanted it to happen. So, we're going to use this hoax as a reason to just get what we want and say white people are bad. When again, the reality is that, hoax hate crimes are really just a lighter form of the really just common unfortunately, extremely common inner city violence that we have. I mean, I think that black people would much prefer that other black people attacked them by graffitiing a bathroom stall with racial slurs. Because the reality is that most black people will choose to attack other black people with guns and or knives and kill them. And so I would say that the black students at the school kind of got off easy, that the black aggressor at their school chose to merely use a marker and to graffiti the bathroom. Lucky for them. Let's see here. Quote, we cannot presume the reasons a student would do this, and it would be important to understand why this happened as we move forward. Keith Marty, the superintendent, added. Well, I mean, yeah, I think the motivations for why black people slaughter other black people at extraordinarily higher rates than any other race in all the major cities, I think that is a question which is important to understand so that we can move forward from that. I don't think there's any effort going into understanding it. But as for the this particular incident, I think the motivation is clear. If this black student had instead murdered another black person, as is common, there would have been some pretty bad consequences for him, right? But this hate hoax thing, this has really been a good boon for minorities, because you can commit a hate hoax, and as long as you don't get caught, even if you do get caught, there's really no consequences, but as long as you don't get caught, you get all kinds of stuff. You get 1,000 students out of school for a whole day and a half. They got to shout slurs and curses at their administrators. I mean, come on, we all been in school before, at least grade school, probably high school, maybe even college. And I mean, come on, you haven't had a teacher or a principal that you didn't want to curse out one day. You didn't want to just you didn't just think, if everybody in this class, if we all just got up and left, teachers couldn't do anything about it. You haven't wanted that? You haven't wished for that before? Well, look at this guy. Look at what reason could he have? Well, the same reason that we all wanted to at one point or another is so that you can get out of class, you can yell at your teachers, you can tell them off, you can get news coverage, you can get media clout. Somehow they found a megaphone and you get to yell, "No justice, no peace." I'm sure it was a blast. It was probably a lot of fun. And up until the black student got found out, well, now all of a sudden the black students and the other minorities at that high school, they were probably about to get a lot of concessions. They were probably set up for the rest of the year that any black student that was getting any kind of disciplinary action, no teacher was going to do that. That they would probably get special events or special clubs or special funding for all kinds of stuff to try to have a reparations policy. There was all kinds of stuff that the black students at the school were going to get had this not been revealed as a hoax. Now, they may still get it just because, as they said, even though it wasn't real, it still says a lot about our culture, which it really doesn't. It says maybe a lot about black culture. It doesn't really say a lot about the American fabric at large. But what motivation could they have? Well, I just listed off, up to a dozen. Those sound like pretty good motivations. Now, I have ethics constraints, so I wouldn't do that. But I can I think it's pretty easy to understand why someone would do that. I think this idea that, oh, wow, hate hoaxes are just so, they're just so mysterious. Why would anybody want to be a victim? Well, I don't think I need to explain why anybody would want to be a victim. I think I just did by giving several tangible examples of the types of rewards you get for being a victim. Let's see here. Superintendent Keith Marty said that the black student, will face severe disciplinary consequences. Brittany Jackson, a senior at Parkway Central, said that the revelation that a black student had written the racist message was, quote, embarrassing. Yeah, I bet it was. Marty said in his letter that he is, quote, proud of the students who participated in the protest. Yes, he's proud of students who overreacted to an event that didn't happen. That's critical thinking. The letter did not include an admonition against the students for cursing or surrounding school officials because, they're just little budding Antifa, pupils. They'll one day butt into full-blown Antifa. So you have to practice surrounding people and shouting them down now so that when they're older, they can add curb stomping their face into the ground repeatedly until they die or have severe mental trauma from it. It's just a hop, skip, and a jump from there. Let's see here. This is not the first time a racist hoax has hit Parkway Central. Oh, no. In 2017, a non-white student of unspecified race was caught writing, quote, "White Lives Matter" and a racial slur. Marty said in a similar statement responding to that situation that, quote, "The student responsible is not white. However, this does not diminish the hurt it caused for the negative impact it had on our community," which is wait, so did he say like literally the exact same thing the last time? Where is it at? Yeah, so this time Keith Marty said it does not diminish the hurt it caused or the negative impact it has on our entire community. And last time there was a hate hoax, he said the student responsible is not white. However, this does not diminish the hurt it has caused or the negative impact on our community. He just has like a canned response for this because it happens so often. That's pretty funny. Wilfred Riley, a professor of political science at Kentucky State University, says in his book, Hate Crime Hoax, that, quote, "a huge percentage of horrific hate crimes cited as evidence of contemporary bigotry are fakes." Yep. Absolutely. As has been stated by Ben Shapiro, the demand by the left for hate crimes far exceeds the supply the right is willing to provide, making a kind of supply and demand joke. So to make up the gap, because the right, we're just not willing to produce that many hate crimes. Maybe a few here and there. There's the crazies. But we're just not willing to produce hate crimes in the volume that the left requires to maintain their narrative of victimhood. And so to make up the gap, the left has to manufacture hate crimes. That's how they do it. Same way that the right absolutely refuses to supply the amount of terrorist plots that the FBI requires for its narrative. So the FBI similarly has to also fabricate right-wing terror plots to meet demand. The right, we're so lazy, just refusing to commit hate crimes, refusing to commit terror plots. Like, man, if we would just, no, I'm not gonna say what I was gonna say, but. We're just so lazy. We refuse to provide that, even though the left would desperately has a demand for it. And I'll reiterate. I think that the origin of hoax hate crimes, I think that it actually has very similar origins to the same reason why blacks kill each other in the inner city at an extraordinarily high rate. I think that there is some kind of cultural failure that has led to this. And, killing's a pretty aggressive thing to do, right? I mean, that's hard. It takes effort. It's scary. You got to get involved with bad people, and it's, maybe not safe. And if you get caught, there's a lot of consequences. But as a younger black person, you can commit a hoax hate crime, and you can cause extreme psychological damage and terror to the black community, as is apparently their goal. And if you get caught, there's no consequences. It's great. It's the perfect new black on black violence. It's hoax hate crimes. All right. Well, if we're not kicked off of YouTube yet, we sure are after that one. Jesus Christ. All right. So that is the show for tonight. I really hope you guys enjoyed that. I will be not here next Saturday. And as I am a lone fox at the moment, we will not be having a show next Saturday. We might have one on Sunday, but I don't think we will. Dyer, as I said last week, he has stepped back from editorial control over Dire Wolf Media. We are still looking at what that looks like for the future, though we are very much trying to have game night come back. We've got some other ideas for different games and activities that we can do and get Dyer back on the show. So that to look forward to. So possibly look out for us next Sunday. Probably not, though. And then probably the week after, we'll start looking at doing at least an intro or a small game stream to try and get us back into the mood for it. And then I'll be back 2 Saturdays from now with another Fox News recap, which we'll have to figure out a different name for that because there's already a Fox News recap, and it's not as good as mine, but they have it copyrighted, so They beat me. Alrighty, guys. Well, you guys have a safe and wonderful rest of the weekend. Hopefully everybody is doing well, all that stuff. And I will see you guys later. Trevize signing off. Peace.